Hey there, welcome back to the channel. In this video, I've put together a new collection of interesting stories, so whether you're here to relax, fall asleep, or just listen in the background, this should be a good one. Feel free to let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always interesting to see where everyone is tuning in from. Now, let's start with the first story. It is titled,
After 10 years building my family's company, my wife plotted with her father and fired me. My wife's mom sneered, "You were always the weak one." I washed cars to survive until a client said, "Those shares you signed years ago are still yours." I saw the value, $5.7 billion. I nearly dropped the keys. The rain came down in sheets that Thursday night. The kind of rain that makes you feel like the world is washing itself clean or trying to. I remember thinking that as I sat in the back of the Uber, watching the city lights blur into watercolor streaks against the window. I was holding a small velvet box in my coat pocket, my fingers tracing its edges like a rosary. 10 years, a decade of building, sacrificing, bleeding into the foundation of something I thought was ours. The anniversary gift inside that box cost me 3 months of saved lunch money, skipped coffees, and one less birthday present for myself. But Sarah was worth it. Sarah was always worth it. The restaurant was one of those places where the waiters know your name and the wine list costs more than most people's car payments. Her father, Richard Chen, had chosen it. Of course, he had. Richard didn't do anything that wasn't a power move, even family dinners. The Sterling Group's patriarch, the man who'd built a logistics empire from a single warehouse in Queens, didn't believe in casual anything. When he called and said we needed to discuss the company's future, my stomach had tightened, but I'd pushed the feeling down. I'd learned to live with Richard's particular brand of tension. It was the price of admission to this family. I walked through those heavy glass doors at exactly 7:30. Punctuality was one of Richard's unspoken tests, and I'd learned years ago never to fail it. They were already seated. The table was round, intimate in theory, a war room in practice. Richard at the head, because even round tables have heads when Richard Chen sits down. Sarah to his right, her mother Linda to his left. And there, across from my empty chair, was David. Sarah's brother, the golden child, the one who'd spent the last decade traveling, finding himself, attending art galleries in Prague and yoga retreats in Bali while I'd been in windowless offices until 3 o'clock in the morning, rebuilding their father's supply chain infrastructure from the ground up. "You're here," Sarah said. Not hello, not I missed you, just an observation, flat as week-old champagne. I kissed her cheek. She smelled like that perfume I'd bought her last Christmas. The one she'd said made her feel powerful. Her skin was cold. "Traffic was hell," I said, sliding into my seat. I smiled at Richard, nodded at Linda, lifted a hand toward David. "Good to see everyone." Linda's eyes flicked over me like I was a wine stain on expensive upholstery. She'd never hidden her disappointment that her daughter had married me. The scholarship kid, the state school graduate, the boy from nowhere with nothing but a finance degree and what she called unrealistic optimism. She'd wanted Sarah to marry into the Goldman family or the Wangs or literally anyone whose last name came with a trust fund and a country club membership. "You look tired," Linda said. It sounded like an accusation. "He's been working," Sarah said. But there was something strange in her voice, something I couldn't place. "Haven't you, James?" "ADR weeks have that effect," I said lightly. I was trying to keep things pleasant. I was trying to keep things pleasant with them. Richard cleared his throat. That particular sound that meant we were moving to business. A waiter materialized with water disappeared. The man knew better than to interrupt Richard Chen mid-thought. "James," he began. And I noticed he didn't use my last name. He never did. I'd been married to his daughter for a decade, and I was still just James, while David was David Chen, announced with the full weight of dynasty behind it. "We've asked you here tonight because there are some significant changes coming to the Sterling Group." My heart kicked against my ribs. Changes. In Richard's vocabulary, that word carried the weight of tectonic plates shifting. "I'm listening." "Ah," I said. Sarah's hand moved to the table, her fingers drumming once, twice. A nervous habit I'd memorized years ago, back when we used to stay up late in our tiny apartment, dreaming about the future. Back when her nervous habits meant she was excited, not whatever this was. "The company is entering a new phase," Richard continued. His voice was measured, the tone he used in boardrooms when he was about to fire someone, but wanted to make it sound like an opportunity. "We're restructuring our leadership team, bringing in new vision, new energy." "That's great," I said, and I meant it. The Sterling Group had been my life's work for the past decade. I'd taken Richard's company, profitable, but stuck in the 20th century, and dragged it into the modern era. I'd implemented the automation systems that cut operational costs by 37%. I'd personally negotiated the contracts with the Chinese manufacturers that opened up the Asian market. I'd been in Shanghai, in Mumbai, in Sao Paulo, missing anniversaries and birthdays and quiet Sunday mornings. All because I believed in what we were building, what I was building for us, for Sarah, for the family I'd married into and desperately wanted to belong to. David is coming on as Chief Operations Officer, Richard said. The room tilted slightly. Just slightly. David smiled at me. It was the kind of smile where a cat gives a mouse before the paw comes down. Congratulations, I heard myself say. My voice sounded normal. That was good. I could do this. David was family. Family helped family. That's fantastic, David. You'll be great. And we're making some other changes, Richard continued. And now there was something in his voice that made my skin go cold despite the restaurant's warmth. We're simplifying our executive structure. Consolidating roles, making things more efficient. Sarah's hand stopped drumming. The silence was louder than thunder. James, Richard said. And I knew in that moment before the words came out of his mouth, I knew. We're letting you go effective immediately. The world didn't explode. The ceiling didn't fall. The other diners kept eating, kept laughing, kept living their lives while mine was being dismantled with surgical precision at table 7. I'm sorry, I said because my brain couldn't process what I just heard. What? We're terminating your position, Linda said, and there was something almost gleeful in her voice. We appreciate your contributions, of course, but the company is moving in a different direction. I looked at Sarah, my wife, my partner, the woman I'd built everything for. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Sarah, I said just her name. A question, a plea, a decade of mornings and midnights compressed into 2 syllables. It's for the best, she said quietly. We need fresh perspectives. Fresh perspectives. I'd given them the Asian market. I'd given them the automation infrastructure. I'd given them 10 years of my life. And they needed fresh perspectives. I don't understand, I said. And I hated how small my voice sounded. The Q4 numbers were record-breaking. The Melbourne contract alone. Well, this isn't about performance, Richard interrupted. This is about vision, about leadership, about family. And there it was, the word that had always been a door I couldn't quite walk through. Family. I am family, I said. I married your daughter. I've worked. You married into the family, Linda corrected, her voice sharp as broken glass. There's a difference. You were always an employee, James. A very dedicated employee, certainly. But an employee nonetheless. David leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine. He hadn't said a word, but his presence was loud as sirens. This had been planned carefully, meticulously. They'd rehearsed this. There will be a severance package, Richard said, sliding an envelope across the table. It sat there between the salt and pepper shakers. Everything I'd built reduced to paper and numbers. It's generous, more than generous. 3 months' salary, benefits extended for 6 months. We're not monsters, James. I stared at the envelope. I didn't touch it. And my projects. I asked the Singapore expansion, the AI logistics integration, those are company projects, Sarah said. And now she did look at me and her eyes were ice. You don't own them. You never did. Something in my chest cracked. Not my heart. That would come later. This was something deeper. The foundation of who I thought I was, who I thought we were, splitting down the middle. How long have you been planning this? I asked. Silence. Sarah, I said. How long? 6 months, she said quietly. We've been discussing it for 6 months. 6 months. While I was in Seoul finalizing the warehouse contracts. While I was pulling all-nighters to make sure the quarterly earnings would make them proud. While I was shopping for an anniversary gift I couldn't afford, she'd been in her father's office planning my execution. I loved you, I said. Past tense. The words came out before I could stop them. Linda laughed. Actually laughed. The sound was like champagne glasses shattering on marble. Love, she said, shaking her head. You were always so dramatic, James. So emotional. That was your problem. You know, in business, emotion is weakness. Richard saw potential in you once, but potential isn't enough. You never had the killer instinct, the ruthlessness. You were always the weak one. The weak one. I stood up, the chair scraped against the floor, too loud in the careful quiet of the restaurant. I need some air, I said. Take the envelope, Richard said. You'll want to review the terms. Your lawyer will. I don't have a lawyer, I said. I was backing away from the table now, my hands shaking. I never needed one. I trusted you. I trusted all of you. Sarah's face flickered with something. Guilt. Regret. But it was gone so fast I might have imagined it. James, she started. Don't, I said. Just don't. I walked out of that restaurant into the rain. And I remember thinking that at least the weather matched the moment. At least the universe had that much sense of drama. I walked for blocks, my phone buzzing in my pocket, texts from Sarah probably, or maybe HR with my final paperwork, and I didn't look at any of them. I ended up on a bench in Bryant Park, rain soaking through my coat, the velvet box still in my pocket. I took it out, opened it, the necklace and its intertwined with mine. The design I'd spent hours working on with the jeweler caught the streetlight and glittered like a promise that no one intended to keep. I sat there until the rain stopped, until the city around me went quiet, until the cold seeped so deep into my bones I couldn't feel my fingers. And then I went home to the apartment I could no longer afford in the building where the doorman already knew I didn't belong there anymore. You can see these things in people's eyes the exact moment you stop being someone who matters. And I started packing. 3 days later, I was sleeping on my college roommate Marcus's couch in Queens, staring at the ceiling at 4 a.m, wondering how you rebuild a life when someone's taken every single brick you used to build it. The answer I would learn was simple. You start with water and soap in someone else's car. You start at the bottom again. You start humble and you wait for the universe to remember that it owes you a receipt. The couch smelled like old pizza and broken dreams. Marcus' apartment was a studio in Atoria, the kind of place where the radiator clanged like a prisoner trying to escape and the neighbors' arguments bled through walls thin as promises. I'd lie there at night staring at water stains on the ceiling that looked like maps to countries I'd never visit and try to remember who I used to be. The first week I didn't leave the couch except to use the bathroom. Marcus would come home from his job at the tech startup, some app that promised to revolutionize grocery shopping or dating or both. I could never keep track. And he'd look at me with this mixture of pity and concern that made me want to disappear into the cushions. You got to eat, man, he'd say, leaving takeout containers on the coffee table. Thai food, Chinese, pizza. Everything tasted like cardboard. Sarah called 17 times the first 3 days. I know because I counted. I didn't answer. By day 4, the call stopped. By day 7, divorce papers arrived via courier. She'd had her lawyer, because of course she had a lawyer. Probably had one waiting in the wings the whole 6 months they'd been planning my professional murder. Draw up everything. The apartment was hers. The car was hers. The life insurance policy we'd taken out together, the joint accounts, the timeshare in Vermont we'd bought when we still believed in shared futures. All of it hers. I signed everything. I didn't have the strength to fight. And even if I did, what was I fighting for? A marriage that had been a business arrangement all along? A wife who could sit across from me at dinner and watch her father execute me without so much as a flinch. You're entitled to half, Marcus said when he saw the papers. Community property. This is New York, man. You don't have to. I don't want anything from them, I said. And I meant it. Taking her money, fighting for the apartment, dragging this out in court. That would mean I still cared. That would mean they still had power over me. I wanted to be free of them completely. Even if freedom looked like a couch in Queens and a bank account with $473 in it. The severance check came a week later. $75,000. 3 months' salary. 10 years of my life reduced to a number that wouldn't even cover a down payment in the city I'd helped them conquer. I deposited the check and started looking for work. That's when I learned what it meant to be blacklisted. The finance world is smaller than you think. Tighter. One bad word from the right person or the wrong person depending on your perspective and doors close before you even know they're there. I sent out 42 applications in 2 weeks. I got 3 responses. 2 were automated rejections. One was an interview for a junior analyst position, junior after I'd been COO, that ended with the hiring manager literally taking a phone call mid-con conversation and then telling me they decided to go in a different direction. I saw the name on his phone screen before he turned it away. Richard Chen. That's when I understood. This wasn't just about firing me. This was about erasing me. Marcus tried to help. He had connections. He said, friends in tech who were always looking for people with operations experience. But every lead went cold. Every conversation started promising and ended with, "We'll be in touch." In the silence that meant they wouldn't. I lasted 6 weeks on that couch before I knew I had to do something, anything, or I'd disappear completely. The severance was bleeding out. Rent to Marcus, even though he'd said I didn't have to pay. Student loan payments I'd deferred but couldn't defer forever. The divorce lawyer I'd finally hired when I realized Sarah's team was trying to make me liable for debts I didn't even know existed. That's when I saw the ad on Craigslist. Car wash attendant needed. Flexible hours cash daily. I stared at that posting for an hour before I clicked. I had an MBA from Columbia. I'd negotiated 8-figure contracts. I'd stood in boardrooms in Singapore and Sydney and Sao Paulo and made decisions that affected thousands of employees' millions of dollars. And now I was applying to wash cars. Pride is a strange thing. You don't know how much of it you have until circumstances take a knife to it and start carving. I'd always thought of myself as humble, as someone who'd come from nothing and remembered where he'd started. But sitting there filling out that application, I realized I'd bought into their version of success. I'd let them make me believe that my worth was tied to my title, my salary, the weight of my business card. The car wash was in Midtown, tucked between a parking garage and a dry cleaner that always smelled like chemicals and lost time. The owner was a guy named Tommy, 60-some with hands like leather, and a laugh that sounded like gravel in a blender. He looked at my application. I'd left off the MBA, the COO title, everything that would make him question why I was there, and hired me on the spot. "You start tomorrow," he said. 6 a.m. Don't be late. I wasn't. The work was exactly what you'd imagine. Spray down the cars, soap them up, rinse, dry, move to the next one, repeat. The water was cold, even in September. And by the end of the first day, my hands were raw and my back was screaming. I made $87 in tips. It was the most honest money I'd earned in years. The other guys who worked there were good people, real people. Carlos was trying to save for his daughter's quinceañera. Miguel was sending money back to family in Ecuador. Jay was a musician who worked mornings so he could play clubs at night. They didn't ask about my past. Didn't care where I'd come from. I was just James, the new guy who didn't complain and showed up on time. For the first time in months, I could breathe. I fell into a rhythm. Wake up at 5, work until 2. Go back to Marcus's apartment. Apply to jobs I'd never hear back from. Sleep, repeat. The weeks blurred together, each one the same as the last, until I couldn't remember if it had been 2 months or 3 or 6. That's when Linda Chen found me. It was a Tuesday, unseasonably cold for October. I was driving off a black Mercedes, some hedge fund guy who never tipped, when a town car pulled up. The kind of car Richard used to send for me back when I mattered. Back when I was still pretending I was part of the family. The window rolled down and there she was, Linda, wearing sunglasses that probably cost more than I made in a month, her face arranged in an expression of carefully practiced disgust. "Well," she said, "this is appropriate." I kept drying the Mercedes. My hands were shaking, but I kept moving the cloth in small circles, focusing on the motion, refusing to give her the satisfaction of seeing me react. "I heard rumors you were working here," she continued. I didn't believe them. I thought even you would have more dignity than this, but I suppose I overestimated you. Again, Carlos was watching from the other side of the lot. I could feel his eyes on me, his protective instincts kicking in, but I shook my head slightly. This wasn't his fight. "What do you want, Linda?" I asked quietly. "Want?" She laughed. "From you? Nothing. You have nothing I want. You never did. I'm simply here to pick up my car from the garage next door." And imagine my surprise when I saw you. The great James Martinez, the boy genius who was going to revolutionize our company. Look at you now. She leaned forward, and even though I couldn't see her size behind those sunglasses, I could feel the contempt radiating off her like heat from asphalt. "You were always the weak one, James," she said. And her voice was soft, almost gentle, which made it worse. "We gave you everything, a position, a salary, a place in our family, and you squandered it. You weren't strong enough. You weren't smart enough. You certainly weren't ruthless enough. Men like Richard build empires. Men like David inherit them. Men like you." She gestured around the car wash. "Men like you wash our cars." Something in me cracked. Not broke. I was too tired to break anymore. Just cracked. A hairline fracture in whatever was left of my pride. "Is that all?" I asked. She smiled. "Yes, that's all. I just wanted to see it for myself. Wanted to confirm that we made the right decision. And looking at you now, standing there in your little uniform with your little spray bottle, I can say with absolute certainty, we did." The town car window rolled up. She drove away. I stood there for a long time, water dripping from the hose in my hand, forming a puddle at my feet. "Hey, man," Carlos said, walking over. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said. "I'm fine." I wasn't fine. I went home that night and sat in the dark in Marcus's apartment and felt something inside me that I hadn't felt in months. Not sadness, not anger, something colder, clearer, determination. They thought they destroyed me. They thought reducing me to this, to manual labor, to poverty, to public humiliation would break me permanently. They thought I'd slink away and disappear and let them write the story of who I was and what I'd meant. They were wrong. I didn't know how yet. Didn't know what I'd do or how I'd do it. But sitting there in the dark, my hands still smelling like car soap and defeat, I made myself a promise. I would rise again. Not for revenge. Revenge was messy, emotional, the kind of thing that Linda was right to say I was too weak for. No, I would rise for something better. For proof. Proof that I was never the weak one. Proof that they'd made the mistake of their lives. And when I had that proof, when I held it in my hands like evidence in a trial they didn't know they were facing, I would show them exactly what it cost to underestimate someone who had nothing left to lose. I just had to survive long enough to find it. Winter came early that year, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and makes you wonder if you'll ever feel warm again. By November, I'd been at the car wash for 3 months, and my body had adapted in ways I never expected. My hands were calloused, immune to the cold water. My back had stopped screaming. I could look at a car and know exactly how long it would take to clean, which techniques worked best on which makes and models. I'd become an expert in something I never wanted to be an expert in. The tips were better now. I'd learned the psychology of it, the smile at the right moment, the extra attention to the wheels, the way to make small talk without being intrusive. Some regulars asked for me by name. It was a strange kind of pride being good at something so simple, so honest. Marcus had stopped asking when I was going to find real work. I think he'd realized somewhere around the second month that this was real work. Maybe the most real work I'd ever done. No politics, no backstabbing, no pretending, just water and soap and elbow grease and the quiet satisfaction of something clean that wasn't clean before. But at night, alone on that couch, I still felt the weight of what I'd lost. Not the money, not the title. Those things seemed increasingly meaningless with distance. What haunted me was the belief. The naive, stupid belief that hard work mattered, that loyalty mattered, that if you gave everything to people you loved, they'd see your worth. I'd been such a fool. It was a Wednesday morning, gray and threatening snow, when the black Audi pulled up. Q7, maybe 2 years old, immaculate, except for the road salt, the kind of car that said money without screaming it. I grabbed my spray bottle and bucket and walked over. The driver's window rolled down and a man in his 60s looked out at me. Silver hair, expensive glasses, the kind of face that had seen things and decided not to be impressed by them. He was wearing a cashmere coat that probably cost more than my entire month's rent. Full service? I asked. He studied me for a long moment. Too long. It made the back of my neck prickle. James Martinez, he said. My stomach dropped. Nobody here knew my last name. I've been careful about that. Paranoid even. The other guys called me Jimmy or Jay or just Hey You. Do I know you? I asked carefully. Robert Kleinfeld, he said, extending his hand through the window. We met once about 7 years ago. Singapore. You were negotiating the warehouse contracts for the Sterling Group. The world tilted slightly. Singapore. I remembered that trip. 3 weeks of brutal meetings, time zones that destroyed my sleep schedule. Humidity that made me feel like I was breathing water. I'd been younger then, hungry, still believing that proving myself would be enough. I shook his hand. His grip was firm, assessing. I remember, I said. You were representing the Tengku Interests real estate portfolio. You have a good memory, he said, looking pleased. I'm impressed you remember. It was a brief meeting. You were there with Richard Chen and his team. But I remember thinking, this kid, you couldn't have been 30 then. This kid actually understands what he's talking about. While the others were posturing, you were asking real questions. Smart questions. I didn't know what to say to that. Compliments felt like traps. Now air asked and there was no judgment in the question. Just genuine curiosity. Working my bond, I said simply. I heard rumors, he said. The finance world talks. I heard you were let go from Sterling. Heard it was sudden. Heard. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I heard it wasn't about performance. It wasn't, I said. He nodded slowly. Family business. Something like that. Those are the worst kind, he said. I've seen it 100 times. Talented people chewed up because they weren't born with the right last name. It's wasteful, cruel, often. I started spraying down his car, needing something to do with my hands. He didn't seem to mind the conversation continuing while I worked. You built a lot of what made Sterling successful in Asia, he continued. The logistics infrastructure, the vendor relationships, the automation systems. I kept tabs on it. I like to know who the real players are, not just the names on the letterhead. You did good work, Martinez. Really good work. Thank you, I said. The words felt strange in my mouth. I wasn't used to professional recognition anymore. I was used to good job from Tommy when I detailed a particularly difficult car or fist bumps from Carlos when we finished a busy rush. What are your plans? Kleinfeld asked. Plans? I almost laughed. Right now, get through today. Maybe tomorrow. That's it. I looked at him directly. Mr. Kleinfeld, I appreciate whatever this is. I do. But if you're here to offer me some kind of pity job, or if you want me to feel bad about myself, or if this is I'm here because I need my car washed, he interrupted. And because I don't believe in coincidences, when I recognized you standing here washing cars, I thought, either this man has given up completely or he's doing what he needs to do to survive, and men who survive are interesting to me. I didn't respond. I kept working, moving to the wheel, scrubbing away the salt and grime. Do you remember the paperwork you signed when you started at Sterling? He asked suddenly. The question was so random it made me stop. The employment contract? I asked. Before that, the very beginning when Richard first brought you on board. I thought back. It felt like another lifetime. I'd been 26, fresh out of Columbia, drowning in student debt, and desperate to prove myself. Richard had made me an offer, decent salary, equity incentive, the promise of building something meaningful. There was a stock agreement, I said slowly. Minor equity stake 0%. It was symbolic more than anything. Richard said it was to make me feel invested in the company's success. Kleinfeld smiled. 3% to be exact. I know because I reviewed Sterling's corporate structure last year when they were exploring some joint ventures with one of my holdings. That agreement, did you ever buy out? Did you ever sign anything terminating that equity position? I tried to remember 10 years of paperwork, hundreds of documents signed in hundreds of offices. The severance agreement had been thorough, covering everything from intellectual property to non-compete clauses to confidentiality. But equity? I don't think so. I said they never mentioned it. The severance papers didn't check. Kleinfeld said check very carefully because if that equity stake still exists and if they didn't properly terminate it as part of your severance, you might own more of that company than you think. My hands had stopped moving. The spray bottle hung loose at my side. Why would that matter? I asked. 3% of Sterling is nothing. Even with the growth, that's 3% of Sterling Group before the Asian expansion, he corrected. Before the automation implementation, before the 3 acquisitions they have completed in the last 8 months, before the Melbourne deal you negotiated closed and added $2 billion in valuation. The number hung in the air between us like smoke. They've been growing, he continued, aggressively. The company you helped build is worth exponentially more than it was when you signed that agreement. And if that equity still exists, if they forgot about it or assumed you'd never check or simply didn't bother to clean it up, he paused. Well, let's just say 3% of $19 billion is more than nothing. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The math was trying to happen in my brain, but kept sliding away like water on wax paint. 19 billion, I repeated. As of their last valuation round, yes, they're positioning for an IPO next year. The company is worth more than Richard probably dreamed when he started it. 3% of $19 billion. I'd washed enough cars in the past 3 months to know basic arithmetic. That was 57 million, I said quietly. If the equity stake still exists, Kleinfeld cautioned. That's a big if. I'm not a lawyer. I'm just a man who's seen enough corporate divorces to know that sometimes in the rush to get rid of someone, companies make mistakes. They forget to cross T's. Do E's, especially family companies that aren't used to playing by institutional rules. He handed me a business card through the window. Heavy stock, embossed lettering, the kind of card that meant serious money. I have a lawyer, he said. Best corporate attorney in New York. Absolutely vicious. Completely ethical, and she loves cases like this. Cases where the little guy might have been screwed. If you want, I can make an introduction. No obligation. Just look into it. Pull your files. Check what you signed, what you didn't sign. I took the card with numb fingers. Why are you helping me? I asked. He smiled, but there was something hard in it. Because I've built 3 companies from nothing. Martinez, I know what it takes. I know the difference between someone who's riding coattails and someone who's actually pulling the sled. And I watched Richard Chen take all the credit for work you did. I watched him in meetings talking about our strategy and our vision when I knew damn well whose strategy it really was. He started his engine. Also, he added, I really hate bullies, and family bullies are the worst kind. They make you think you're supposed to take it. That loyalty means letting them destroy you. I stood there holding his business card as he drove away. My Audi gleaming and perfect. The card said Patricia Wong, Corporate Law, Kleinfeld and Associates. Carlos came over whistling low. That guy tipped you $100. He said, "What did you do? Wash his car with your tongue?" I looked down. There was a folded bill in my bucket. Benjamin Franklin staring up at me. "He was just an old client," I said. But that night, back at Marcus's apartment, I couldn't sleep. I pulled out the box I'd shoved under the couch 3 months ago, the box with all my Sterling documents, the things I couldn't bear to look at, but couldn't bear to throw away either. I dug through severance agreements, NDAs, intellectual property transfers. Page after patch of legal language, all of it designed to separate me from the company I'd built. But nowhere, and I checked 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, nowhere was there any mention of equity termination. No buyout clause, no forfeit agreement, nothing. The original stock certificate was there, yellowed and forgotten at the bottom of the box. 3% of the Sterling Group issued to James Martinez, dated January 15, 10 years ago. I held it up to the light like it might disappear if I looked away. $57 million. If it was real, if it was valid, if they'd made the mistake I suddenly, desperately hoped they'd made. I pulled out my phone and stared at Patricia Wong's number for a long time before I finally started typing. "My name is James Martinez. Robert Kleinfeld gave me your card. I need to know if I still own part of the company that destroyed my life." I hit send before I could second guess it myself. The response came back in less than 2 minutes. "Come see me tomorrow, 9 a.m. Bring everything." Patricia Wong's office was in Midtown, 53rd floor of a building where even the elevator felt like it was judging you. I stood in the lobby at 8:45 wearing the only suit I still own, the one I'd worn to my last day at Sterling, now slightly too big because I'd lost weight washing cars and eating ramen. My shoes were scuffed. My tie was from JCPenney. I looked like exactly what I was. A man who used to belong in places like this and no longer did. The receptionist was polite in that razor-sharp way expensive firms teach their staff. Smile with your mouth. Assess with your eyes. Make people know they're being measured. "Mr. Martinez," she said, "Miss Wong is expecting you. Conference room 3. The conference room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The kind of view that reminded you how small you were and how big the game was. Patricia Wong was already there, standing at the window with her back to me, talking on her phone in rapid Cantonese. She was smaller than I'd expected, maybe 5 feet 2 inches, wearing a black suit that probably cost more than I'd made in the last month. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and when she turned around her eyes were the sharpest thing I'd ever seen. "I'll call you back," she said into the phones, then to me. "Sit." I sat. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Robert says you might have an equity stake in a company that fired you. The Sterling Group, Logistics, and Supply Chain, Richard Chen's baby. That correct?" "Yes," I said. "And you brought documentation." I slid the folder across the table. Everything I'd found last night, the original stock certificate, the employment contract, the severance agreement, my entire professional life reduced to 37 pages. She put on reading glasses and started going through it with the focus of a surgeon examining x-rays. She didn't speak for 10 minutes, just read, occasionally making notes on a legal pad with a fountain pen that looked like it cost more than my rent. Finally, she looked up. "This is interesting," she said. "Interesting good or interesting bad?" "Interesting like watching a man fall off a building in slow motion. You don't know if he's going to hit the ground or if there's a miracle waiting." She tapped the stock certificate. "This is legitimate. Properly executed. Filed with the New York Secretary of State. 3% equity stake issued January 15th, 15 years ago. No expiration, no buyback clause, no forfeit language. It's clean." My heart was hammering. And the severance agreement doesn't mention it, not once. They covered intellectual property, non-compete, confidentiality, trade secrets, future employment, social media behavior. They were very thorough about everything except the one thing that actually matters. She smiled, and it was the smile of a predator that had just spotted wounded prey. "They forgot about your equity. How is that possible?" I asked. "They had lawyers, good lawyers. This is a billion-dollar company. Family companies make family company mistakes," she said. "They operate on assumptions, relationships, informal agreements. Richard Chen probably thought of that equity stake as a gesture, something symbolic he gave you when you were young and grateful. He probably forgot it existed. Or he assumed it was so small it didn't matter. Or, and this is my personal theory, he was so focused on humiliating you, on making you feel worthless, that he didn't think you'd ever have the nerve to check." She leaned forward. "Do you know what Sterling Group's current valuation is?" Kleinfeld said $19 billion. "Close. As of their last funding round in September, they're valued at $18.7 billion. They're preparing for an IPO next spring. The preliminary prospectus is public record. I pulled it this morning. They're projecting a $24 billion IPO valuation. Conservative estimates say the stock will double in the first year. The numbers were too big. They kept sliding around in my head, refusing to become real. 3% of $18.7 billion, I said slowly. Is $56.1 million? She finished. Current value. If they IPO at $24 billion and you retain your shares, you're looking at $72 million. If the stock performs the way analysts predict, you could be looking at $150 million within 3 years. The room was spinning. I gripped the edge of the table. But there's a problem, she continued. Actually, several problems. First, that equity is currently illiquid. You can't just cash it out. It's shares in a private company. Second, if they discover you're claiming this stake, they will fight hard. They'll argue that it was invalidated by your termination, that there was a verbal agreement, that you waived it somehow. They'll drown you in motions and depositions and legal fees until you give up. So, I can't win, I said. My voice sounded hollow. I didn't say that. Her smile widened. I said they'll fight, but here's what they don't know yet. You have time on your side. That IPO prospectus, it has to disclose all shareholders with stakes above 1%. Your name isn't on it, which means either they genuinely forgot you exist or they're committing securities fraud by omitting a material shareholder. Either way, the SEC would be very interested. She pulled out a thick document and slid it across the table. This is what we call leverage, Mr. Martinez. If we threaten to go to the SEC before the IPO, Richard Chen has 3 choices. 1. Fight us and delay the IPO while they sort out the shareholder dispute, which will cost them millions and make investors nervous. 2. Buy you out immediately at current valuation to make you go away quietly. 3. Let you keep the shares and add you to the prospectus, which means admitting they screwed up and having you as a permanent shareholder in their family company. Which option do you think they'll choose? I asked. Depends on how much pride Richard has versus how much he wants that IPO money. But my guess, they'll try to buy you out, offer you $30 million, $40 million, something that sounds huge to you, but is a discount to them. They'll make it seem generous. They'll make you feel like you're getting more than you deserve. What do you think I should do? She sat back, studying me. That depends on what you want. Is this about money? Because if it is, take the buyout. $30 million is more than most people see in a lifetime. Walk away. Rebuild your life. Never think about them again. And if it's not about money, then you hold it, you refuse the buyout. You demand your seat at the table. You make them add you to the prospectus. You become a shareholder they can't erase. You sit in their annual meetings. You vote on their decisions. You remind them every single day that they didn't destroy you, that they couldn't. Her eyes were gleaming now. She was enjoying this. That's what you want, isn't it? She said, not the money, the proof. You want to prove they were wrong about you. I thought about Linda's face through that town car window. You were always the weak one. I thought about Sarah's ice-cold eyes across that restaurant table. I thought about Richard's dismissive tone, David's smug smile, the 6 months they'd spent planning my eraser while I worked myself to exhaustion, believing I was building our future. Yes, I said quietly. I want them to know they were wrong. Patricia nodded slowly. Then here's what we do. We file a formal claim with the company notification that you're asserting your shareholder rights. We give them 30 days to respond. They'll panic, call their lawyers, scramble to figure out how this happened. Then they'll come to us with offers. Big offers. Scary big offers designed to make you shut up and disappear. And I say no. You say no. We negotiate only for one thing. Recognition as a legitimate shareholder with full voting rights. We don't ask for more equity. Don't ask for damages. Don't make this about money. We make it about principle, about what's legally, indisputably yours. They'll hate that, I said. They'll despise it. Richard Chen doesn't lose. He especially doesn't lose to people he's already defeated. It'll drive him insane. She smiled, which is frankly the best part. What's this going to cost me? I asked. I have about $60,000 left for my severance. I can't afford. Robert's retainer covers the initial filing and negotiation, she interrupted. He's already paid me. Consider it an investment. He likes you. More importantly, he hates your in-laws. The Chen screwed him on a deal about 5 years ago. He's been waiting for an opportunity to return the favor. I stared at her. So, this is revenge. This is business. The fact that it also happens to be incredibly satisfying revenge is just a bonus. She gathered up the documents. I need you to sign some papers. Power of attorney, legal representation agreement, a few other things. And I need you to prepare yourself for what? For them to come at you with everything they have. They'll investigate you, dig up dirt, try to find leverage. They'll make offers that sound like miracles. They'll have Sarah call you. Probably use your history against you. They'll play on your guilt, your feelings, your desire to not be the bad guy. She leaned across the table, her voice dropping. Can you handle that? Can you look your ex-wife in the eye and tell her no? Can you sit across from your former father-in-law and not back down? Because if you can't, we should walk away right now, take what we can get, and call it a win. I thought about the couch in Marcus's apartment, the cold water at the car wash, the sound of Linda's laughter when she called me weak, the 3 months of silence from every person I'd thought was a friend who disappeared the moment I was no longer useful. I can handle it, I said. Patricia smiled. Good, because honestly, this is the most fun I have had in years. Family companies think they're untouchable. They think loyalty and tradition matter more than contracts and law. I love proving them wrong. She stood up, extended her hand. Welcome to the fight of your life, Mr. Martinez. Try not to let them see you sweat. I shook her hand. Her grip was iron. One more thing, she said as I was leaving. Don't tell anyone about this. Not your roommate, not your coworkers, not anyone. When we file, it needs to be a surprise. The element of shock is part of our leverage. How long until we file? I'll have everything ready by Friday. We'll serve them next Monday morning. By Monday afternoon, your life is going to get very interesting. I walked out of that office building into the November cold. And for the first time in months, I felt something besides numbness. I felt dangerous. I went to the car wash that afternoon and worked my shift. Sprayed down Benzes and Beamers and Teslas. Smiled at customers, collected tips. Carlos asked if I was okay. I must have looked different somehow. Must have been carrying myself differently. Yeah, I said. I'm good. That night on Marcus's couch, I pulled out my phone and looked at the photos I'd avoided for months. Pictures of Sarah and me, our wedding day, vacations, quiet Sunday mornings. All those moments I thought were real. I deleted every single one. Not out of anger, out of clarity. She was the past. The Kins were the past. What came next was the future. And the future, I was beginning to realize, belonged to people who refused to stay down. The weekend before Patricia filed the claim felt like waiting for an execution. Mine or theirs, I wasn't sure yet. I worked my shifts at the car wash, went through the motions, but my mind was elsewhere, playing out scenarios, imagining Richard's face when he received the notification, wondering if Sarah would call, what she'd say, whether any part of her would feel guilty. Marcus noticed Saturday night, he ordered Thai food and sat down across from me with that look, the one that said we were going to talk whether I wanted to or not. What's going on with you? He asked. You've been weird all week. More weird than usual. Weird. Nothing. I said, bullshit. I've known you since freshman year. I know your poker face. You don't have one. He pointed his chopsticks at me. Is this about Sarah? Did she contact you? No, it's not about Sarah. Then what? I wanted to tell him. Marcus had given me his couch, his food, his patience. He'd watched me fall apart and hadn't judged me for it. But Patricia's warning echoed. Don't tell anyone. The element of surprise is our leverage. I might have some legal stuff happening. I said carefully with Sterling about my severance. Legal stuff good or legal stuff bad? Potentially very good, but I can't talk about it yet. He studied me for a long moment, then shrugged. Okay. But if you need anything, money, backup, someone to punch Richard Chen in the face, I'm here. I smiled despite myself. I'll keep that in mind. Monday morning came too fast and too slow. I called in sick to the car wash, first time in 3 months, and spent the hours between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. pacing Marcus' apartment, checking my phone every 30 seconds, even though Patricia said she wouldn't contact me until after the papers were served. At 9:47 a.m., my phone rang. Patricia's number. It's done, she said. Courier delivered the shareholder notification and legal claim to Sterling Group's corporate headquarters at 9:30. They'll be reading it right about now. My mouth was dry. What happens next? We wait. They'll need time to verify the claim. Panic. Call their employers. I'd expect to hear something by end of business today. Maybe tomorrow if they're being strategic. And if they don't respond, they'll respond. Trust me, this isn't something they can ignore. She was right. At 2:17 p.m., my phone rang again. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, heart hammering. The voicemail notification popped up. I played it on speaker. James, this is David Chen. His voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the fury underneath. We need to talk. Call me back immediately. This is absurd. Whatever game you're playing, it needs to stop. Call me. I forwarded the voicemail to Patricia without responding. At 3:45 p.m., another call. Richard Chen. This time I didn't answer. His voicemail was shorter, colder. James, my lawyers are reviewing your claim. This is highly inappropriate. We treated you fairly, more than fairly. I expect to hear from you or your counsel by end of business tomorrow. At 5:30 p.m., the call I'd been dreading, Sarah. I stared at her name on my screen for all 6 rings before it went to voicemail. Her voice when it came through sounded tired, defeated, almost human. James, it's me. I know you probably don't want to talk to me. I understand that, but please can you call me back? This thing with the shares, we need to discuss it. My father is losing his mind. David is threatening to sue you into oblivion. It's chaos here. A pause. Please just call me. Let's figure this out like adults. Like adults. Like we hadn't been adults when they planned my firing over 6 months. Like we hadn't been adults when they humiliated me at that restaurant. Like we hadn't been adults when she sent divorce papers while I was sleeping on a couch in Queens. I deleted the voicemail. Patricia called at 6. I've received 3 calls from Sterling's legal team. They want to meet tomorrow if possible. They're offering to fly me to their offices. What did you say? I said we'd meet at my office Thursday at 2 p.m. and they could bring whoever they wanted. They didn't like it, but they agreed. They're scared, James. Really scared. Why Thursday? Why not tomorrow? Because desperation is a curve. Tomorrow they'd be angry. By Thursday, they'll be terrified. The IPO deadline is real. Every day this drags on costs them leverage with investors. We want them afraid, not angry. Tuesday was quieter. Just 2 calls. One from a number I didn't recognize, probably another Sterling lawyer, one from David again. I ignored both. I went back to the car wash. Needed the simple physics of water and soap and shine. Tommy pulled me aside during lunch break. You okay, Jimmy? You seem distracted. Just some personal stuff, I said. It'll pass. You need time off? I shook my head. Work helps. Keeps me focused. He nodded satisfied. Tommy was good that way. He cared, but he didn't pry. Wednesday, the call stopped. The silence was worse than the noise. I kept checking my phone, wondering if I'd somehow missed something crucial. If they'd found a way around the claim, if this was all going to evaporate like every other hope I'd had in the last 6 months. Patricia texted at noon. Radio silence is normal. They're strategizing, preparing their offer. See you tomorrow. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on Marcus' couch and watched shadows move across the ceiling and thought about all the ways this could go wrong. They'd find a loophole. They'd prove the equity was invalid. They'd offer me money and I'd be weak enough to take it because $30 million was still $30 million. And who was I kidding? I wasn't strong enough for this fight. You were always the weak one. I got up at 4 a.m. and went for a walk. The city was quiet. That strange pre-dawn hush when even New York takes a breath. I ended up at the East River watching the water catch the first hints of sunrise. And I made myself remember. I remembered being 26, sitting in Richard's office, him telling me I had potential, telling me I could be part of something bigger than myself. I remembered believing him. I remembered 10 years of believing him. I remembered the night I proposed to Sarah. How she'd cried and said yes and told me she couldn't imagine life without me. How we'd stayed up until dawn making plans, dreaming dreams that felt so solid I could have built a house from them. I remembered the first major deal I'd closed for Sterling, the Shanghai distribution center. How I'd called Richard from the airport, exhausted and triumphant, and he'd said, "I knew you could do it, son." Son. The word I'd wanted to hear from my own father who died when I was 12 and never saw me become anything. I remembered all of it. Let myself feel the weight of it. And then I let it go. Not with anger, not with forgiveness either. Just release. Like opening your hand and watching something fall that you'd been holding too tight for too long. They didn't get to define me anymore. Not who I was, not who I'd been, not who I'd become. I went back to the apartment, showered, put on my JCPenney suit, and headed to Patricia's office. She was already in the conference room when I arrived at 1:30 reviewing documents with 2 associates I hadn't met before. "James," she said, looking up. "Good. We're almost ready. They'll be here at 2. It's going to be Richard, David, their chief counsel, and probably one of their outside attorneys. Big guns. They want to intimidate. Will it work?" She smiled. "On them or on you?" At precisely 2 p.m., the receptionist showed them in. I'd steeled myself for this moment, practiced staying calm, but nothing quite prepared me for seeing them again. Richard in his 1000 suit, still carrying himself like a man who'd never heard the word no. David beside him, all entitled swagger and family name. Their lawyers, 2 men in matching navy suits who looked like they'd been grown in the same corporate lab. And then behind them, Sarah. She wasn't supposed to be here. This was a legal meeting, a business negotiation. But there she was, wearing that blue dress I'd always loved, her eyes finding mine across the table and holding them. "James," Richard said, not sitting. "This is unnecessary." "Mr. Chen," Patricia interrupted smoothly. "Please sit. We have a lot to discuss." They sat. The lawyers immediately started pulling out documents, tablet computers, a whole arsenal of legal weaponry. Patricia just smiled and folded her hands on the table. "I'll make this simple," Richard said, his voice tight. "That equity agreement was a courtesy, a gesture. It was never meant to be this. You left the company. You took a generous severance. This claim is frivolous and frankly insulting. The claim is legally valid." Patricia said, "The equity was never terminated. Your severance agreement doesn't mention it. Your termination letter doesn't mention it. There is no paperwork anywhere that invalidates Mr. Martinez's ownership stake. You made a mistake, Mr. Chen. It happens. We're prepared to offer a settlement." One of the lawyers said, $20 million, full release of all claims, confidentiality agreement. Mr. Martinez can walk away and rebuild his life. 20 million. The number hung in the air like a golden parachute. 6 months ago, a week ago, maybe even yesterday, I might have taken it. "No," I said. Sarah's eyes widened, Richard's jaw clenched. "Excuse me," David said. "You're washing cars for minimum wage and you're turning down $20 million. "I'm turning down $20 million, I confirmed." "Then you're an idiot," David said. "David," Sarah said quietly. "Don't." $25 million, Richard said. "Final offer. Take it or we'll bury you in litigation. We have resources you can't imagine. We'll fight this for years, decades. You'll spend every penny you have and still lose." Patricia leaned forward. "Mr. Chen, let me be very clear. My client isn't interested in a buyout. Not at 20 million, not at 50 million, not at any number. He wants what's legally his recognition as a shareholder with full voting rights. That's all." "That's not acceptable," Richard said. "Then we have a problem," Patricia said, "because your IPO prospectus is due for final SEC filing in 6 weeks, and right now it's incomplete. You failed to disclose a material shareholder. That's securities fraud, Mr. Chen. The penalties are severe. The delays could be catastrophic." The room went very quiet. "You're threatening us," Richard said slowly. "I'm stating facts. You have 3 options. Buy him out. He's declined. Fight him in court. That delays your IPO and cost you hundreds of millions. Or recognize his legitimate stake and add him to the prospectus. Those are your choices." "There has to be another way," Sarah said. And she was looking at me now. Really looking at me. "James, please. We can work this out, you and me, like we used to." And there it was. The play Patricia had warned me about, the emotional manipulation, the call back to better days. "There's nothing to work out," I said quietly. "I own 3% of Sterling Group. I've owned it for 10 years. I'm not giving it up. I'm not selling it. I'm keeping what's mine. After everything we gave you," Richard started. "You gave me nothing," I said, and my voice was steady, calm, the calmest I'd felt in months. "I earned everything. Every contract, every deal, every innovation. I built your Asian expansion. I designed your automation systems. I made you billions. And you fired me over dinner like I was nothing. You were family," Sarah said, and her voice cracked. "I was never family. Your mother made that very clear." Richard stood up. "We're done here. You want a war, James? You'll get one." "Mr. Chen," Patricia said, not standing. "The law is very simple. He owns the shares. You can't erase that. You can fight it, waste everyone's time and money, but the outcome is inevitable. Or you can be smart. Add him to the prospectus. Let him keep his 3%. Stay silent. Vote his shares as a block with yours. He's willing to agree to that. You get your IPO. He gets his dignity. Everyone walks away." Richard stared at her, then at me. I watched him calculate, saw the precise moment he realized he'd lost. "I need time," he said finally. "You have until Monday," Patricia said. "After that, we file with the SEC." They left, all of them. Sarah lingering for just a moment at the door, looking back like she wanted to say something, but she didn't. The door closed. Patricia turned to me, grinning. Well, that went better than expected. I was shaking. Adrenaline, fear, relief, everything at once. Did we win? I asked. What? Yet, but we're close. Very close. My phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. We need to talk privately. Just you and me. Please, Sarah. I showed Patricia. She raised an eyebrow. Your call, she said, but be careful. She's either genuinely sorry or she's trying one last play. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I turned off my phone. I didn't turn my phone back on until Friday morning. When I did, there were 43 missed calls. 17 from Sarah, 12 from David, 8 from unknown numbers. Probably their lawyers trying different tactics. 6 from Richard and just one, from Patricia. They're panicking. Good. Stay strong. The voicemails were a symphony of desperation. David threatening lawsuits. Richard's lawyers using words like tortious interference and bad faith negotiation. And Sarah. Always Sarah. Her voice getting progressively more raw, more real until the last message. Left at 2 o'clock in the morning where she was crying. James, please. I know I don't deserve it, but please just talk to me. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. I need to explain. I need you to understand what happened. What I a long pause. The sound of her breathing. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please. I listened to that message 3 times, hating myself for it. Hating that part of me that still remembered loving her, that still heard the girl I proposed to under the Brooklyn Bridge. Not the woman who'd watched me get executed at dinner without saying a word. Marcus noticed me staring at my phone. You okay? Sarah keeps calling. You going to talk to her? I don't know. My lawyer said to be careful that it might be a trap. What does your gut say? I thought about it. My gut said a lot of things. That I missed her. That I hated her. That I wanted to understand how someone could claim to love you and destroy you in the same breath. That maybe, just maybe, there was more to the story than I knew. My gut says I'm an idiot if I meet her. And I said, then don't. But by Saturday afternoon, I texted her back. One conversation, public place, tomorrow, 3 p.m. the coffee shop on Lexington and 52nd. Her response was immediate. Thank you. I'll be there. Sunday arrived wrapped in that particular kind of cold that makes you question every decision that led you outside. I got to the coffee shop at 2:40, ordered a black coffee I didn't drink, and sat at a table by the window where I could see her coming. She arrived at exactly 3:00 p.m. That was so Sarah, punctual to the point of compulsion, another trait she'd inherited from Richard. She was wearing jeans and a simple sweater, her hair down, no makeup. She looked smaller, somehow, younger, more like the woman I'd married and less like the stranger who'd divorced me. She ordered tea, chamomile, no sugar, the same thing she always ordered when she was stressed, and sat down across from me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Thank you for meeting me, she said finally. I'm not sure why I did. Because you're a better person than I am. She wrapped her hands around her cup, not drinking. James, I need you to know that I didn't want to do it. Any of it. The firing, the divorce, any of it. But you did it anyway. Yes, I did it anyway. She looked up at me and her eyes were red-rimmed. Do you remember when we first got engaged? What my father said. I remembered. We'd been in his office showing him the ring I'd saved for months to buy. Richard had smiled, shook my hand, and then said, welcome to the family. Just remember family is everything. Loyalty is everything. He said family is everything. I said he said loyalty is everything. Sarah receded. And I believed him. I still believe him. That's the problem. I was loyal to him. I said I gave him 10 years. I gave him everything. You were loyal to the company. Not to him, not to us. Not really. She saw my expression and held up a hand. I know how that sounds. I know it's not fair, but that's how he sees it. You were always an outsider, James. You worked harder than anyone, sacrificed more than anyone, but you were never one of us. Not really. Because I didn't have the right last name. Because you didn't think like us. She leaned forward. The Melbourne deal. Do you remember what my father wanted to do? I remembered Richard had wanted to lowball the Australian partners, squeeze them on terms, use sterling's size as a weapon. I'd argued against it, said it was short-sighted, that we needed them more than they needed us. I'd negotiated a fair deal instead. Both sides won. The contract was worth billions. I made sterling $2 billion. I said, you made them partners instead of servants. Sarah said, That's what my father couldn't forgive. You treated people like equals. You built relationships instead of empires. You thought business was about collaboration. He thinks it's about conquest. So he fired me for being decent. He fired you for being different. For showing David that there was another way to run a company, a better way. She was crying now. Quiet tears that she kept wiping away with the back of her hand. David looks up to you. You know, he always has. That's why my father wanted you gone, because you were the son he wishes he had, and David knew it, and it was destroying their relationship. The words hit me like cold water. David hates me. David hates that my father respects you more than him. Respected. Past tense. Now my father has to pretend you were always worthless. Because admitting the truth that he fired the best executive he ever had would mean admitting he was wrong. And Richard Chen doesn't do wrong. And you? I asked. Where do you fit into this? She looked down at her tea. I'm his daughter. I'm supposed to be loyal to family above everything. That's what I was raised to believe. That's what he's always taught me. So when he said you had to go, she trailed off. You chose him over me. I chose family over everything. The way I was taught, the way I thought I was supposed to. She looked up at me and the pain in her eyes looked real. It probably was real. That was the worst part. I've regretted it every day since. Every single day. But not enough to do anything about it. Not enough to call me. Not enough to tell your father he was wrong. I'm here now. She said, you're here now because I have leverage. Because I own shares you forgot about. If I was still washing cars and you'd already gotten the divorce you wanted, would you be here? She didn't answer. The silence was answer enough. What do you want, Sarah? I asked, suddenly exhausted. Why are we really here? I want to explain. I want you to understand that I never stopped caring about you. That this wasn't personal. It was just business. Family business. You fired me over dinner and divorced me over courier. And you think it wasn't personal? I think it was the hardest thing I've ever done. I think I lost myself doing it. I think I've been trying to figure out who I am without you. And I don't like what I've found. She reached across the table, put her hand on mine. It was warm, familiar. Once upon a time, that touch meant safety. Home. Let this go, she said softly. Please take the money my father's offering. 30 million. We'll go to 40 if that's what it takes. 50. Name your price. Take it and walk away. Build a new life. Find someone better than me. Be happy. And you get the IPO. Your family gets their billions. Everyone wins except the guy who actually built the company. Everyone wins, including you, James. $50 million is more money than most people see in 10 lifetimes. You could do anything. Go anywhere. You'd never have to work again. Is that what you think I want? To never work again? I think you deserve peace. I think you deserve to not be angry anymore. I think you deserve better than this fight. I pulled my hand away. You know what I realized? Sitting on that couch in Queens, the couch I had to sleep on because you took the apartment I paid for. I realized you never really knew me at all. That's not true. You think this is about money? I said, cutting her off. You think everything is about money because that's how your family thinks. But I don't want their money, Sarah. I want them to acknowledge what I built. I want my name on something I created. I want proof that I wasn't nothing. She was shaking her head, tears streaming freely now. You were never nothing. I never thought you were nothing. You watched your mother call me weak and you said nothing. You sat there while your father executed my career and you said nothing. You've been saying nothing for 10 years, Sarah. Your silence said everything. I was wrong, she whispered. I know I was wrong. I've known it since the day you walked out of that restaurant. I knew it when I signed the divorce papers. I know it every morning when I wake up and you're not there. Then why didn't you call? Why didn't you fight for me? Because I'm a coward, she said, and the words came out like a confession. Because I've spent my entire life doing what my father tells me to do, being who he wants me to be. Because the one time I chose something for myself, chose you, he made me feel like I was betraying everyone. And I couldn't handle it. So, I took the easy way out. I let him make you the villain, and I pretended to believe it. I wanted to hate her. It would have been easier if I could just hate her. But sitting across from her, watching her fall apart, all I felt was tired. Your father's wrong about the shares, I said quietly. Patricia checked everything. The equity is mine. Legally, indisputably mine. He can't make it go away. I know. His lawyers told him the same thing. She wiped her eyes. He's furious at them, at me, at the universe, but mostly at himself. He made a mistake and he can't fix it by being Richard Chen. He can't intimidate it away or buy it away or will it away, and that's destroying him. Good. She flinched. James, no. He destroyed me, Sarah. He took everything I worked for and threw it away like garbage. He told everyone in the industry I was incompetent. Made sure I couldn't get hired anywhere. Your mother watched me wash cars and laughed about it. You all treated me like I was disposable. So, forgive me if I don't feel sympathy for Richard Chen having a bad week. It's more than a bad week. The IPO is in jeopardy. The investors are getting nervous. David is panicking because he doesn't actually know how to run operations. He's been faking it, using all your old systems and pretending he invented them. The whole thing is falling apart. Part of me felt vindicated. The larger part felt nothing. They'd built their house on sand and called it a castle. Now the tide was coming in. What do you want me to say? I said, they asked. I want you to tell me what it would take. Not for the money, not for the IPO, for you. What would it take for you to walk away from this and find peace? I thought about it. Really thought about it. What did I want? Revenge felt empty. Victory felt hollow. Even the $57 million, a number that should have meant everything, felt increasingly irrelevant. I want them to tell the truth, I said finally. I want Richard to admit publicly that I built that Asian expansion, that the automation systems were my design, that the Melbourne deal happened because of my work. I want my name in the IPO prospectus with proper attribution. I want everyone who invested in Sterling Group to know that the foundation they're betting on was built by me. Sarah stared at me. He'll never do that. You know he won't. Then I keep my shares. I vote against every board decision. I attend every shareholder meeting. I become a permanent reminder of his mistake for the rest of his life. That's not peace, James. That's prison for both of you. Maybe. But it's honest prison. No more pretending. She stood up, grabbing her purse. I can't help you if this is what you want. I came here hoping you'd be reasonable. Hoping we could find a middle ground. There is no middle ground between truth and lies, Sarah. That's the problem. You keep trying to find compromise in places where compromise is just another word for eraser. She looked at me for a long moment, something shifting behind her eyes. You've changed. I've clarified there's a difference. I miss who you were. The man who would have forgiven me. Who would have chosen peace over principle. That man washed your family's cars and got called weak for it. I'm someone else now. She left without another word. I sat there with my cold coffee and watched her disappear into the Sunday afternoon crowd and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no regret, just the quiet certainty that I'd made the right choice. My phone rang an hour later. Patricia, Sarah Chen just left my office, she said. She came by unannounced, wanted to make one final plea. She offered $75 million on behalf of her father. Full buyout, confidentiality agreement, and a reference letter saying you left Sterling on good terms. $75 million? The number didn't even sound real anymore. I'm assuming you told her no, I said. I told her I'd relay the offer to my client. That's you, by the way. So, I'm asking, do you want to consider it? Do you think I should? I think $75 million would solve a lot of problems. I also think you've made it very clear this isn't about money. But, James, I need you to understand something. If we reject this offer and move forward, things get ugly. Really ugly. They'll come after you personally, dig up everything, try to destroy your credibility, make you regret ever filing this claim. I worked for them for 10 years. They know everything about me already. You'd be surprised what people can weaponize when they're desperate. Old emails taken out of context. Colleagues who will testify you were difficult to work with. They'll paint you as greedy, vindictive, someone who's trying to exploit a technicality to steal from a family that gave you everything. None of that is true. Truth doesn't matter when you control the narrative. They have PR firms, media connections, money to make you the villain. Are you ready for that? I thought about Linda's face through that car window. David's smug smile at that dinner table. Richard's dismissive tone when he fired me like I was nothing. Sarah's cold eyes as she chose her family over everything we'd built together. Yes, I said. I'm ready. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Okay, then. I'll inform them the offer is rejected. Tomorrow morning, we'll file with the SEC. By tomorrow afternoon, this becomes a public matter. There's no going back after that. Good. James, one more thing. When this hits the news, and it will hit the news, your life changes. Reporters will call. Investors will want to know who you are. Sterling's competitors will reach out. You won't be anonymous anymore. You won't be able to go back to washing cars and living quietly. Is that what you want? I looked around Marcus's apartment, the couch that had been my home for 4 months. The life I'd built in the wreckage of the old one. Simple, honest, small. I don't know what I want yet, I said. But I know what I don't want. I don't want to disappear. I don't want them to write my story. I don't want another 30 years wondering if I was really as worthless as they made me feel. Fair enough. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be interesting. I didn't rest. I went to the car wash Monday morning, my last shift before everything changed. And I worked like I'd worked every day for the past 4 months. Carlos noticed something was different. You seem lighter, man, he said during lunch. Like you're carrying less weight. Maybe I am, I said. You hear back about that legal thing? Yeah, it's happening today, actually. Good news or bad news? Yes, he laughed. Cryptic. I like it. Well, whatever it is, you deserve something good. You're a good dude. Jimmy, best work ethic I've ever seen. You ever want a reference, I got you. The simplicity of it almost broke me. This man, who knew nothing about my past or my degrees or my accomplishments, valued me for showing up on time and doing honest work. It was the purest respect I'd received in years. Thanks, Carlos. That means a lot. At 2:47 p.m., while I was drying off Alexis, my phone buzzed. Patricia, it's done. SEC filing submitted. Sterling Group is now officially required to address the shareholder discrepancy in their prospectus. Expect fireworks. At 3:15 p.m., the first news alert popped up. Sterling Group IPO faces unexpected shareholder dispute. The article was brief, just the facts. Former executive claiming ownership stake. SEC investigating discrepancy. Potential impact on $24 billion valuation. By 4 p.m. my phone was ringing nonstop. Unknown numbers, reporters probably. I ignored them all. By 5 p.m. the story had grown. Bloomberg picked it up. Then Reuters, then the Wall Street Journal. Sterling Group's hidden shareholder, former COO, claims $78 stake. Tommy called me into the office at 5:30. He had his laptop open, an article on the screen. He looked at me, then at the screen, then back at me. James Martinez, he read aloud, former chief operating officer of Sterling Group, claiming 0.3% equity stake valued at approximately $70 million. James, is this you? I nodded. You're a millionaire. Not yet. Maybe never. It's complicated. He sat back in his chair processing. You've been washing cars for 4 months. You're potentially worth $70 million and you've been washing cars. I needed the work. I needed to remember what honest work felt like. He laughed, shaking his head in disbelief. You're either the craziest or the chest person I've ever met. I can't decide which. Can I finish my shift? Are you kidding? Get out of here. Go deal with whatever this is. And James, he stood up, extended his hand. It's been an honor having you. Not because of the money or the company or any of that. Because you showed up every day and did the work without complaining. That's character. That matters more than all the millions in the world. I shook his hand, feeling a lump in my throat. Thanks, Tommy, for everything. For giving me a chance when no one else would. You ever need a reference? You know where to find me. I left the car wash for the last time and walked to Marcus's apartment through the early evening cold. The city felt different somehow, sharper, more alive. Or maybe I was just paying attention again. Marcus was already home when I arrived, his laptop open. The news on the screen. Dude, he said, dude, you're on Bloomberg. You're on CNBC. They're talking about you on the business channels. I know. $70 million, James. $70 million. I know. And you didn't tell me. We've been eating ramen for months and you potentially own $70 million. I didn't own anything until today. Until this morning, it was just a maybe, a hope. Now it's real. He closed his laptop, looked at me seriously. What happens now? I don't know. Patricia says Sterling has 30 days to respond to the SEC. They'll probably try to fight it. Claim the shares are invalid somehow. Drag it out. But you'll win. She thinks so. The law is pretty clear. Then you're rich. You're actually going to be rich. I sat down on the couch, my couch, the one that had been my home through the worst months of my life, and tried to process what that meant. You know what's weird? I said, I thought getting here would feel different. I thought I'd feel victorious or powerful or something, but I just feel tired. That's because you're not done yet, Marcus said. This is just round one. They're going to come at you with everything now, and you've got to be ready. He was right. My phone kept buzzing. Texts from Patricia, emails from reporters, voicemails from lawyers and investors, and people I'd never heard of. The quiet life I'd built was over. Whatever came next would be public, messy, complicated. But for the first time in months, I wasn't afraid of complicated. I was ready for it. At midnight, one last text came through from Sarah. "You won. I hope it was worth it." I stared at the message for a long time before responding. I didn't win anything yet. I just stopped losing. She didn't reply. I lay down on the couch and stared at the ceiling and thought about everything that had led to this moment. The dinner that destroyed me. The car wash that rebuilt me. The lawyer who believed me. The client who remembered me. The numbers that proved I'd never been nothing. Tomorrow the real fight would begin. Richard Chen would mobilize his entire empire against me. The lawyers would file motions. The media would dig into my past. The machine I'd helped build would try to crush me. But tonight, I let myself feel something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. Not hope that I'd win. Not hope that I'd get rich. Not even hope that I'd get the recognition I deserved. Just hope that I'd proven, at least to myself, that Linda Chen was wrong. I was never the weak one. I was the one who survived. The reporters found Marcus's apartment building by Tuesday morning. I woke up to the sound of someone buzzing the intercom, insistent and repetitive. When I looked out the window, there were 3 news vans parked on the street, cameras pointed at the entrance like weapons. "You're famous," Marcus said, peering over at my shoulder. Or infamous. I can't tell which. Patricia called at 7 a.m. Don't talk to anyone. Don't answer the door. Don't post anything on social media. Sterling's PR machine is already spinning this, and we need to control the narrative. What are they saying? That you're a disgruntled ex-employee trying to extort money from a family business, that the equity stake was a clerical error you're exploiting, that you signed documents years ago waiving your ownership rights but conveniently lost them. They're painting you as opportunistic and vindictive. None of that is true. I know. But they don't need truth. They need reasonable doubt. By the time we prove them wrong, the damage to your reputation will be done. That's the strategy. Make you toxic so that even if you win legally, you lose practically. So what do? We file our response. We let the facts speak. And we wait for them to make a mistake. They will. Desperation breeds errors. Richard Chen's not used to fighting defensive battles. He'll overreach. She was right about the desperation. By noon, Sterling Group had filed 3 separate motions. One to dismiss my claim as frivolous. One to freeze any potential distribution of shares pending litigation, and one requesting an emergency injunction to prevent me from voting my shares at any future shareholder meetings. Patricia called them legal spam, volume over substance. By Wednesday, the story had evolved. The Wall Street Journal ran a feature, The $70 Million Question: Did Sterling Group's family dynasty forget their star employee? The article was surprisingly balanced. Detailing my role in the Asian expansion, the automation systems, the Melbourne Mayan deal. They'd interviewed former colleagues who went on record saying I'd been the operational genius behind Sterling's transformation. They'd also interviewed David, who called me a talented employee who never understood the difference between doing your job and owning the company. The phrase made my blood boil. Doing your job like 10 years of ADR weeks, missed anniversaries, sacrificed health was just clocking in and out. But the article also included something I hadn't expected. A quote from Robert Kleinfeld. James Martinez was the most capable executive I've encountered in 30 years of business. If Sterling Group built an empire in Asia, he was the architect. The Kins may have provided the capital and the name, but Martinez provided the vision. History will remember that even if they'd prefer it didn't. I called him that afternoon. "Thank you for the quote. You didn't have to do that. I didn't do it for you," he said, though his tone was kind. "I did it for accuracy and because watching Richard Chen squirm is excellent entertainment. How are you holding up?" "I'm surviving barely." That's all you need to do. Survive longer than they can maintain the pressure. Rich people get bored easily, stay boring, stay consistent, and they'll eventually cave. You really think so? I know. So, I've seen this play out 100 times. The only question is whether you have the stomach for it. I thought about that a lot over the next few days. Did I have the stomach for this? Every morning brought new attacks. Sterling's lawyers filed motion after motion. Each one more aggressive than the last. They demanded access to my financial records, claiming I'd mismanaged company funds during my tenure. They subpoenaed my emails, looking for anything that could be twisted into malfeasance. They even reached out to the car wash asking questions about my mental state and whether I'd exhibited unstable behavior. Tommy called to warn me. "Some fancy lawyer came by asking about you. I told him you were the best employee I ever had and he could shove his questions. But James, what the hell is going on? They're trying to make you sound crazy. They're trying to discredit me, make me seem like I'm having a breakdown so my claim looks less legitimate. That's disgusting. That's business. At least the version of it. The media attention intensified. Business Insider ran a profile from COO to car wash. The spectacular fall of James Martinez. The article recounted my dismissal, my subsequent unemployment, my work at Tommy's car wash. They made it sound romantic, like I'd chosen this path deliberately, some kind of philosophical journey into humility. The reality, sleeping on a couch, skipping meals to save money, the crushing weight of professional annihilation didn't make it into the narrative. But the article did something unexpected. It humanized me. Suddenly, I wasn't just a legal case or a business dispute. I was a person, someone who'd fallen and gotten back up. Someone who'd worked with his hands when his brain wasn't wanted anymore. The public response surprised everyone. Social media exploded with hashtags. Had justice for James #Sterling. Group exposed #CarWashGo. People shared stories of being dismissed by family businesses, of building things for others only to be discarded. My story became their story. Patricia called Thursday afternoon. You're trending. Like actually trending. Twitter, LinkedIn, even TikTok. There are memes. Good memes. You've become a folk hero. I don't want to be a folk hero. I just want what's mine. Well, you're both now and it's working in our favor. Sterling's PR team is scrambling. They didn't anticipate public sentiment turning against them. Rich family screwing over loyal employee plays very differently in 2025 than it would have 20 years ago. Does public opinion matter legally? Not directly, but it matters to investors. It matters to the SEC, who's now under public pressure to investigate thoroughly. It matters to Sterling's board, who's fielding as uncomfortable questions about corporate governance. Public opinion is leverage, James, and right now we have it. Friday brought the turning point. I was at a coffee shop in the village, hiding from the reporter still camped outside Marcus Building, when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. James Martinez. A woman's voice, professional, but warm. Yes. My name is Helen Reeves. I'm the CFO of Meridian Holdings. We're a private equity firm focused on logistics and supply chain investments. I've been following your situation with great interest. Okay, I said cautiously. I'll get to the point. We've been looking at Sterling Group for 2 years, considering a potential investment or acquisition. Your case has revealed some very interesting information about the company's operational structure and leadership. Information that suggests the business you built might be separable from the family that owns it. I'm not sure I follow. What if you didn't have to fight Sterling for your shares? What if there was another option? We'd like to meet with you, discuss a potential opportunity. No obligations, just a conversation. I told Patricia about the call that evening. She was silent for a long moment. This is either brilliant or dangerous, she said finally. Maybe both. What did you tell her? That I'd think about it. Smart. Here is what's happening. Meridian smells blood in the water. They're thinking that if Sterling's internal structure is fractured enough, if the family's fighting publicly with a shareholder, there might be an opportunity to acquire the company at a discount or to poach key assets. Your involvement makes you valuable to them and them. So, they want to use me. They want to work with you. There's a difference. James, what if you didn't have to fight Richard for scraps? What if you could actually build something new through your expertise, your reputation, your sudden public platform to create something that's entirely yours? The idea took root immediately, not fighting for what I built at Sterling, but building something new, something better, something that proved I'd never needed them at all. Set up the meeting, I said. The meeting happened Monday at Meridian's offices. Glass and steel on Park Avenue. The kind of place where decisions worth billions happened over coffee that cost more than most people's lunches. Helen Reeves was 50-ish, sharp-eyed, with the kind of presence that made you sit up straighter without realizing it. Mr. Martinez, she said, shaking my hand. Thank you for coming. I'll dispense with the pleasantries. We've been watching Sterling Group's growth trajectory with increasing concern. They've expanded rapidly, but the infrastructure is shaky. The automation systems, your systems are brilliant, but they're not being properly maintained. The Asian partnerships you built are fraying because no one there understands the relationships like you did. The Melbourne deal is already showing stress fractures. David doesn't know what he's doing, I said. Correct. He's a placeholder wearing your shoes and everyone knows it. The company is worth $20 billion on paper, but without the operational genius that built it, that valuation is fantasy. Which brings me to our proposal. She slid a folder across the table. We want to build a competitor, a logistics and supply chain company that does everything Sterling does, but better. More ethical partnerships, more innovative automation, better treatment of employees. We provide the capital, a $200 million Series A to start. You provide the expertise, the leadership in your name, which is currently worth more than you realize. I stared at the folder without opening it. You want me to compete directly with Sterling? We want you to build what Sterling should have been, what it would have been if it weren't hobbled by family politics and ego. James, you're in a unique position. You have public sympathy, industry respect, and a legitimate grievance. You also have something Sterling can never buy. Moral authority. People want to see you succeed now. They want to see the underdog win. That's worth more than marketing, more than brand recognition. That's cultural capital. And your stake, 60% initial equity, decreasing to 40% over 5 years as you hit performance milestones. You'd be CEO, full operational control, board seat guaranteed. We're investors, not operators. We back people who know what they're doing and stay out of their way. I opened the folder. The terms were generous, absurdly generous, more than fair. Why me? I asked. You could hire any consultant, any operations expert. Why build a company around someone who's currently being sued by their former employer? Helen smiled. Because you're not just someone, you're a story. You're proof that talent matters more than pedigree. That hard work matters more than birthright. In an age where people are exhausted by dynasty and nepotism, you're something rare. Someone who earned everything and got screwed for it. That's not just good business, Mr. Martinez. That's justice. And justice sells. I thought about it. Really thought about it. This wasn't about fighting Sterling anymore. This was about proving I could build something better without them. About taking everything they tried to destroy and using it to create something they could never compete with. What about my Sterling shares? I asked. I'm still fighting for those. Keep fighting. Win if you can. We don't care about your past compensation. We care about your future value. Though I'll admit, watching Richard Chen's face when his former employee becomes his biggest competitor would be satisfying for everyone involved. Patricia had been quiet throughout the meeting. Now she spoke up. What's the timeline? We'd like to move fast. Formal term sheet by end of week. Initial funding within 30 days. Operations launch within 90. Sterling's IPO is scheduled for March. We'd like to be operational by February. Generating press about the ethical alternative to Sterling Group. Make investors think twice about where they put their money. That's aggressive. Patricia said that's necessary. Window of opportunity is small. Right now, James is sympathetic. 6 months from now, he's old news. We need to move while the narrative is fresh. I looked at Patricia. She gave me a small nod. The lawyer equivalent of this is legitimate. I need time to think, I said. Of course, you have until Friday. After that, we pursue other options. Helen stood, extended her hand again. James, I've built 6 companies from scratch. I know talent when I see it. You're the real deal. Sterling Group's loss is someone's enormous gain. I'd like it to be ours. We left the meeting and walked 3 blocks before either of us spoke. She's not wrong, Patricia said finally, about any of it. This could be huge or it could blow up spectacularly. Life's binary like that sometimes, safe or spectacular. Rarely both. What do you think I should do? She stopped walking, looked at me directly. I think you should ask yourself what you're actually fighting for. If it's recognition from the Kins, you'll never get it. They'll die before they admit you were valuable. But if it's proof to yourself, proof to the world that you were never nothing. This does that. This does that louder than any shareholder statement or IPO filing ever could. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on Marcus's couch, though he'd started calling it the $70 million couch, which made us both laugh, and thought about everything. 2 paths. Fight Sterling for what was mine. Drag it through courts and media and years of exhausting battle, or build something new, something better, something entirely mine from the beginning. My phone buzzed, text from Sarah. We need to talk. My father is willing to negotiate, please, before this gets worse. I stared at the message, then typed back, there's nothing to negotiate. I'm done fighting over scraps. Her response came immediately. What does that mean? I didn't answer. Instead, I pulled up Helen Reeves's number and started composing an email. The subject line was simple. I'm in. The term sheet arrived Wednesday morning. 47 pages of legal precision that essentially said, we believe in you enough to bet $200 million on it. I read it 3 times with Patricia, then once more alone, making sure I understood every clause, every contingency, every way this could either liberate me or bind me to something worse than Sterling ever was. It's clean, Patricia said after our final review. Remarkably clean. No hidden traps, no poison pills. The equity vesting schedule is aggressive but fair. The performance milestones are ambitious but achievable. Helen Reeves wasn't lying. They really do want you to succeed. And if I fail, then you fail with $200 million of their money, not yours. You are risking your reputation and your time. They're risking capital. That's the deal. That's always the deal. I signed it Thursday afternoon in Meridian's conference room, the same room where Helen had made her pitch. This time there were more people, lawyers, accountants, board members, all watching as I put my name on something that would either validate everything I'd ever believed about myself or prove that I'd been lucky once and foolish twice. Congratulations, Helen said, shaking my hand. You're now the CEO of Martinez Global Logistics. We've already filed the corporate paperwork, secured the initial banking relationships, and leased office space in Long Island City. You start Monday. Martinez Global Logistics. I said, that's the name. Your reputation is the brand. People want to work with you, invest in you, believe in you. We're not hiding that. We're celebrating it. She handed me a folder. Inside, you'll find preliminary budgets, hiring authority, and a list of consultants we've identified who might be interested in jumping ship from Sterling. All former colleagues of yours, all people who've reached out expressing interest in working with you again. I opened the folder, 23 names, people I'd worked with, trained, mentored, operations managers, logistics coordinators, systems architects, the backbone of what I'd built at Sterling. They'd leave Sterling to work with me. They already want to. We've had preliminary conversations with 14 of them. All expressed enthusiasm. Most are just waiting for the official offer. James, you weren't just good at your job. You were the reason a lot of talented people stayed at Sterling as long as they did. You created loyalty. Now you get to benefit from it. The news broke Friday morning. Business Insider ran it first. Former Sterling COO launches competitor with $200 backing. By noon, it was everywhere. Bloomberg, Reuters, CNBC, Wall Street Journal. The narrative wrote itself. Disgraced executive rises from car wash to CEO, backed by major private equity firm, preparing to challenge the family business that destroyed him. Sterling stock, they'd done a small private placement ahead of the IPO, dropped 4% on the news. My phone exploded. Reporters, investors, former colleagues, people I hadn't heard from in years suddenly wanting to reconnect. I ignored most of them, but I did answer when Robert Kleinfeld called. Congratulations, he said. Though, I'm not surprised. I told you survival was the strategy. You've done more than survive. I haven't done anything yet. Right now, it's just a term sheet and a dream. It's more than that. It's a threat to Sterling, to Richard, to the entire narrative. They've been building about you being worthless. You've turned their biggest weapon, your dismissal, into your greatest asset. That's rare. That's smart. I had good help. You had good instincts. The help just gave you permission to trust them. Sarah called that afternoon. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was short, clipped, professional. We need to discuss your new venture. There are legal implications regarding non-compete clauses in intellectual property. Call me back. I forwarded it to Patricia without listening to it again. They're panicking, Patricia said when she called back. I've received similar messages from their legal team. They're claiming you're violating your severance agreement, that there was an implied non-compete, that you're using Sterling's trade secrets. It's all bluster. Your severance agreement specifically allowed you to work in the industry. There's nothing about not competing. They're just scared. Should I be worried? Only if you actually are using their trade secrets. Are you? No. Everything I'm building is based on my own knowledge, my own experience. I'm not taking files or client lists or proprietary systems. I'm just doing what I know how to do. Then they can threaten all they want. They won't win. But James, be prepared. They're going to try to make this ugly. They'll claim you're stealing clients, poaching employees, undermining their business. The fact that you're actually just competing fairly won't stop them from claiming otherwise. She was right. By Monday morning, my first official day as CEO of Martinez Global, Sterling had filed an emergency motion seeking to block me from hiring any former Sterling employees, claiming I was engaging in a coordinated campaign of corporate raiding. Helen Reeves laughed when she saw it. They're terrified. Employees wanting to work for you isn't raiding. It's consequences. Maybe if they treated people better, they wouldn't be fleeing at the first opportunity. We held our first company meeting that afternoon in temporary office space. Just 12 people, the core team Helen and I had assembled. 4 former Sterling employees who'd officially resigned that morning. 3 consultants with deep logistics experience. 2 tech specialists Helen had recruited from a failed startup, an HR director, a CFO, and me. Thank you all for being here, I started. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, authoritative but uncertain, like I was trying on a suit that didn't quite fit yet. Most of you know my story. Some of you lived parts of it with me at Sterling. All of you are here because you believe in what we're trying to build. Not just another logistics company, but a better one. One that treats employees like assets, not expenses. One that builds partnerships, not dependencies. One that proves success doesn't require cruelty. I looked around the room, 12 faces, all of them trusting me with their careers, their futures, their belief that I was worth the risk. I can't promise this will be easy. Sterling is going to come after us. They have more money, more connections, more brand recognition. But we have something they don't. We're right. Not morally right, though I believe we are right, strategically right, operationally right about how this industry is evolving, and if we execute well, if we stay focused and stay ethical, we won't just compete with Sterling, we'll make them irrelevant. The speech was met with applause, genuine enthusiastic applause that made something tight in my chest loosen slightly afterward. Marcus Chen, no relation to the otherkins, he liked to joke. One of the former Sterling operations managers pulled me aside. I need you to know something. And he said, when David took over your role, he called a meeting, told everyone that you'd been let go because you weren't family material, that you'd never really understood the business, that you'd gotten lucky with a few deals but didn't have real vision. Half the room knew it was, the other half wanted to believe it. Because believing otherwise meant admitting they work for people who destroy talent out of spite. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to understand what you're up against. It's not just Richard and David. It's everyone at Sterling who's invested in the lie that you didn't matter. If you succeed, if this company thrives, it proves they've been propping up mediocrity and calling it excellence. They can't afford for you to win. It would shatter their entire self-concept. Good. Hashiman said, let it shatter. The first month was chaos. Beautiful, exhausting chaos. We worked 18-hour days building systems, establishing protocols, reaching out to potential clients. I was doing everything: operations, strategy, sales, even some IT troubleshooting. When our systems crashed at 2 o'clock in the morning, it was exactly like the early days at Sterling, except this time I owned it. This time, my name was on the door. We landed our first client in week 3, a mid-size manufacturing company that had been using Sterling for distribution. They'd heard about Martinez Global, reached out directly, said they wanted to work with the guy who actually built Sterling's Asian network, not the kid who inherited it. The contract was small, $2.3 million annually, but it was proof of concept. We could compete. We could win. Sterling's response was immediate and vicious. They called our new client, offered them a 50% discount to stay. The client called me, told me about the offer, asked what we could do. Nothing. I said, we can't match that. They're operating at a loss to keep you. It's not sustainable. So, I should take their offer. You should do what makes sense for your business. If price is all that matters, take Sterling's deal. But understand, they're only doing this because they're afraid. Once we're gone, once the threat is eliminated, that discount disappears. You'll be right back where you started. Except now you'll know they see you as a pawn, not a partner. The client thought about it for 2 days, then called back. We're staying with you, not because of price, because we trust you. That's worth more than 50%. We celebrated that night, the whole team. Pizza and beer in our barely furnished office. All of us knowing we'd won something bigger than a contract. We'd won respect. But Sterling wasn't done. They filed another lawsuit in week 5, claiming we'd stolen their client list. We hadn't. The client had come to us, but the accusation itself was damaged enough. 2 other prospects who'd been considering us suddenly went quiet. This is the strategy, Patricia explained. Death by 1,000 lawsuits. They don't need to win. They just need to make working with you seem risky, complicated, litigious. They're trying to poison your reputation with enough legal smoke that potential clients can't see the fire isn't real. How do we fight it? We win one decisively. We take one of their lawsuits to court and we embarrass them publicly. Make an example. Show everyone else that their threats are empty. We picked the client-stealing claim. It was the most obviously false, the easiest to disprove. Patricia filed a motion to dismiss with prejudice, arguing the claim was frivolous and possibly sanctionable. The hearing was scheduled for mid-December, 2 months after I'd signed with Men, 3 months after the SEC filing that had started everything. I walked into that courtroom wearing the same J.C. Penney suit I'd worn to my last day at Sterling, now properly fitted because I could afford a tailor. Richard was there sitting in the front row with David and a phalanx of lawyers. Sarah wasn't. I didn't know if that meant something or nothing. The judge was a woman in her 60s named Margaret Brennan, known for not tolerating nonsense. She listened to Sterling's lawyer argue that we'd engaged in systematic targeting of Sterling Group clients using proprietary information obtained during Mr. Martinez's employment. Then Patricia stood up. Your Honor, this claim is not just without merit, it's demonstrably false. The client in question, Dilmare Manufacturing, initiated contact with Martinez Global Logistics. We have emails, phone records, and sworn testimony from their CEO. Sterling Group is attempting to use this court to prevent legitimate business competition. They're embarrassed that a former employee is succeeding without them. So, they're trying to criminalize success. It's petty. It's baseless, and it's wasting this court's time. She submitted documentation, phone logs, emails, a letter from Dilmare's CEO explicitly stating they'd sought us out, that no one from Martinez Global had ever contacted them first. Judge Brennan read everything in silence. Then she looked at Sterling's lawyers. Do you have any evidence at all, that Mr. Martinez or his company initiated this relationship? Sterling's lead counsel hesitated. We believe there must have been preliminary contact. That isn't documented. Belief isn't evidence, counselor. This is a court of law, not a court of imagination. Do you have evidence? We believe further discovery would reveal. That's a no. Judge Brennan closed the file. Motion to dismiss granted. Furthermore, I'm awarding attorney's fees to the defendants. Sterling Group, you've attempted to use litigation as a competitive weapon. That's not what our legal system is for. Consider this a warning. File another frivolous suit against Martinez Global and I'll consider sanctions. The gavel came down like a thunderclap. We'd won. Richard stood up and walked out without looking at me. David followed, his face red with fury. Their lawyers gathered their materials in embarrassed silence. Patricia turned to me, grinning. And that's how you slay a dragon. The news spread fast. That night, Business Insider ran it. Judge slammed Sterling Group for frivolous lawsuit against former executive. The article was brutal, detailing how Sterling had tried and failed to use legal intimidation, how the judge had awarded us fees, how we'd proven our legitimacy. My phone started ringing immediately. 3 new client inquiries, 2 former Sterling employees asking about positions, a reporter from Forbes requesting an interview for a feature on ethical business alternatives. We'd been in business for 2 months, and we were already becoming something real. That night, I went back to Marcus's apartment, still my home. Though I could afford my own place now. I just hadn't had time to move. Marcus was waiting with champagne. You won, he said, popping the bottle. You actually won. One battle, not the war. Yeah, but James, it's still a win. After everything they did to you, after all the ways they tried to destroy you, you stood in a courtroom and a judge told them they were wrong. That's not nothing. That's everything. I took the champagne glass, let myself feel the moment. He was right. It was everything. My phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. This is Linda Chen. We need to talk. Please call me. I stared at the message for a long time. The woman who'd called me weak, who'd sneered at me washing cars, who'd made it clear I'd never be family. Now she wanted to talk. I showed Marcus. He whistled low. What are you going to do? I thought about everything that had happened, everything that had changed. About the boy who'd wanted so desperately to belong to their family and the man who had realized he didn't need to. I deleted the message without responding. I'm going to keep building, I said. That's what I'm going to do. 6 months after I'd signed those first papers with Patricia Wong, Martinez Global Logistics had grown from 12 people in temporary office space to 87 employees across 3 locations. We'd landed 19 major clients, 8 of them former Sterling accounts who'd switched because they trusted me more than they trusted David's fumbling attempts to replicate what I'd built. Our revenue projections for year 1 had been conservative. Helen Reeves had estimated $40 million. We were on track to hit $73 million. Sterling's IPO scheduled for March had been delayed twice. First to May, then to July. Investor confidence was shaky. The lawsuits they'd filed against me, all dismissed or withdrawn, had raised questions about management stability. David's operational failures were becoming impossible to hide. Their Q1 earnings released in April showed declining margins in Asia and problems with the Melbourne contract I'd negotiated years ago. Turns out relationships matter. Turns out you can't just inherit expertise. The business press was having a field day. Forbes ran a cover story in May. The Revenge of James Martinez. How a fired executive built a better company. The article detailed everything. The dinner that destroyed me. The car wash that humbled me. The lawyer who armed me, the company that validated me. It painted Richard Chen as a cautionary tale about hubris and family politics. It painted me as proof that talent finds a way. But the real turning point came in June. Patricia called me on a Tuesday morning, her voice carrying something I'd rarely heard from her. Excitement. Remember how Sterling's been fighting to keep your original equity stake tied up in litigation? She said, claiming it was invalid, that you'd waived it, that there were verbal agreements nullifying it. Hard to forget, they filed 18 motions. 19. But I've got news. The judge just ruled final ruling. No more ice peels. Your equity stake is valid. All of it. 3% of Sterling Group belongs to you. Free and clear. They have to add you to the shareholder register immediately. I sat down. The office around me, my office in a building with my name on it, seemed to tilt slightly. How much? I asked. Based on their most recent valuation, which was filed with the SEC last month, $72.4 million. And James, it gets better. Because of the delays they caused, because of all the litigation they forced, the judge is awarding you damages. Another $6.3 million to cover legal fees and lost opportunity costs. You're a $78.7 million man officially. I couldn't speak. The number was too big, too surreal. A year ago, I'd been washing cars for tips. 6 months ago, I'd been sleeping on Marca's couch eating ramen. Now, there's more. Patricia continued, the judge included language in the ruling, strong language. She said Sterling's attempts to invalidate your equity were bad faith litigation designed to deprive Mr. Martinez of his lawful ownership interest. She essentially called them out for corporate bullying. That language is going to be cited in business law classes for years. You didn't just win, James. You won decisively. You won on the record. You won in a way that will follow them forever. When do I get the money? They have 30 days to execute the transfer. My guess they'll try to negotiate one more time, offer you a settlement to avoid the public spectacle of you officially becoming a shareholder. But James, you don't need to settle anymore. You've already won. This is just deciding whether you want the money now or the satisfaction of watching them squirm forever. I thought about it. $78 million would change everything. I could expand Martinez Global faster, hire more people, compete more aggressively. I could buy a house, help Marcus, never worry about money again. But being a Sterling Group shareholder, having my name in their prospectus, attending their annual meetings, voting on their decisions, that was something else. That was permanent proof. That was the receipt. I want the shares, I said, not a buyout. The actual shares. I want my name in their prospectus. I want to sit in their annual meeting. I want them to see me every single time they celebrate success that I built. Patricia laughed. I was hoping you'd say that. I'll file the paperwork this afternoon. The news broke within hours. Bloomberg Sterling Group forced to recognize former executive 78 stake. Wall Street Journal judge rules against her against Sterling and shareholder dispute awards damages. CNBC brought me on for an interview. The anchor, a woman named Jennifer Park, who'd made a career of skewering bad executives, smiled like a shark when I sat down. Mr. Martinez, you're now worth nearly $80 million, and you're running a successful competitor to the company that fired you. Does this feel like vindication? It feels like clarity, I said. For a long time, I questioned whether I'd actually contributed anything meaningful to Sterling, whether I'd been lucky or skilled, valued or tolerated. Now I know the market knows, the law knows. I built something real. They couldn't erase that no matter how hard they tried. Your former father-in-law, Richard Chen, has declined to comment on the ruling, but sources say he's furious. Does that give you satisfaction? I thought about that question carefully. A year ago, the answer would have been yes. Absolutely yes. I'd wanted him to suffer the way he'd made me suffer. Wanted him to feel small and worthless and disposable. But sitting there in a studio being interviewed as a CEO and a vindicated shareholder, I realized something. Richard Chen's feelings didn't matter to me anymore. His fury, his embarrassment, his regret. None of it could touch me. I'd moved beyond needing his validation or enjoying his pain. I hope he learns from it, I said finally. I hope he learns that talent matters more than pedigree. That loyalty should be earned, not demanded. That the people who build your empire deserve to be treated like partners, not servants. If my situation teaches him that, then something good came from something painful. The interview went viral. The clip where I said, I hope he learns from it, was shared millions of times, praised as gracious and devastating in equal measure. People loved it because it wasn't vengeful. It was something harder. It was dignified. 3 days later, I received a letter. Physical letter, expensive stationery delivered by courier. The return address was Richard Chen's personal office. Inside was a single page handwritten. James, I'm writing this against the advice of my lawyers, my family, and my better judgment. But some things need to be said directly, not through intermediaries or press releases. You were right about the Asian expansion, about the automation systems, about the Melbourne deal, about how to treat employees, how to build partnerships, how to run a company with integrity. You were right about everything, and I was too proud to admit it. When I brought you into Sterling, I saw in you what I wished I'd seen in my son. Talent, drive, vision, the hunger to build something meaningful. I thought if I could shape you, mold you into what I wanted David to be, maybe I could prove to myself that leadership is taught, not inherited. But the more successful you became, the more it exposed David's inadequacies. And instead of dealing with that honestly, I blamed you for being too good. I convinced myself you were the problem. Firing you was the worst business decision I've ever made. But worse than that was her. It was cruel. Linda's comment about you washing cars. She told me about that encounter. Told me she'd put you in your place. I should have been disgusted. Instead, I was satisfied. I told myself you deserved humiliation for daring to be better than my son. I've spent 30 years building Sterling Group. You spent 10 years making it great. The difference between those two things is something I'm only now beginning to understand. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not expecting reconciliation. I'm simply acknowledging what the court has made official. You were never the weak one. You were never the one who didn't belong. You were the best of us and we were too small to see it. Congratulations on Martinez Global on the ruling on proving everyone wrong. Richard Bum. I read the letter 3 times. Each time I felt something different. First, anger. Too little, too late. Second, sadness. For what could have been if he'd said this a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Third, and finally, acceptance. This was as close to an apology as Richard Sean was capable of giving. It wasn't enough to undo the damage, but it was something. It was acknowledgement. I showed it to Marcus that evening. He read it, handed it back. What are you going to do with it? Nothing. Keep it. Maybe frame it. Not because I forgive him, but because it's proof. Proof that I was right to believe in myself when no one else did. You going to respond? I thought about it. Thought about writing back saying something gracious or cutting or was. But what was there to say? The letter was his burden to carry, not mine to relieve. No, I said finally. He doesn't need my response. He needs to live with what he did. That's punishment enough. 2 weeks later, Sterling Group's annual shareholder meeting was held at the Waldorf History. I received my invitation, as was my legal right as a registered shareholder, and I debated whether to attend. It would be theatrical, potentially petty, definitely uncomfortable for everyone involved. I went anyway. The ballroom was full of investors, board members, analysts. Richard stood at the podium with David beside him presenting the year's results. The numbers were down. Revenue flat, margins declining, client retention problematic. Richard tried to spin it positively, talked about market challenges and transitional periods, but everyone in that room could read between the lines. Sterling was struggling. When the Q&A portion began, I didn't raise my hand. I just sat there in the third row, visible to everyone. Several people recognized me, whispered to their neighbors. I watched Richard's eyes find me, hold for a moment, then look away. After the formal meeting ended, there was a reception. I was heading for the exit when a voice stopped me. James. I turned. Sarah. She looked different, thinner, tired, her eyes carrying a weight that hadn't been there before. Hi, I said. Can we talk just for a minute? We found a quiet corner. She held a glass of wine. She wasn't drinking. I read about your company, she said. About the ruling, about everything. You did it. You actually did it. I did what I had to do. I'm proud of you. She said it quietly like a confession. I know I don't have the right to say that anymore. I know I lost that right when I chose my family over you, but I am proud and sorry. So incredibly sorry. I know, I said. I got your father's letter. He wrote you? She looked surprised. He didn't tell me. What did it say? That he was wrong about me. About everything. She nodded slowly, tears forming. He was. We all were. James, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect anything. I just wanted you to know that I've regretted it every single day. The firing, the divorce, all of it. You were the best thing in my life, and I destroyed it because I was too weak to stand up to my family. Your mother called you the weak one, I said. Not me. She was talking about herself. Sarah laughed through her tears. Maybe, probably. God, we're a mess, aren't we? The Chen family empire built on pride and cruelty and fear. You could leave. I said, you don't have to stay. And do what? I've been Sterling Group my entire life. I don't know how to be anything else. I didn't know how to wash cars. You learn. She smiled sadly. Maybe I'm not as brave as you. You could be if you wanted to. She looked at me for a long moment. Are you happy with your company, your life, all of it? I thought about Martinez Global, about the team I'd built, the clients who trusted me, the future I was creating brick by brick, about the couch I'd slept on and the cars I'd washed in the long climb back from nothing, about Patricia and Helen and Robert Kleinfeld and everyone who'd believed in me when I'd stopped believing in myself. Yes, I said I am. Good. You deserve that. You always did. She started to walk away, then turned back. For what it's worth, I think you were always going to be successful with or without us. We didn't make you, James. We just got to watch for a little while, and we should have been grateful for that. I watched her walk away, disappear into the crowd of Sterling shareholders and executives and the machinery of a company that was slowly realizing it had lost its engine. I left the Waldorf and walked through Manhattan in the summer evening. The city alive and indifferent around me. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through messages. One from Patricia. Meridian wants to discuss Series B funding. They're thinking 500 million. Updawn call me. One from Marcus Chen at Martinez Global. Australian distributor wants to meet, could be huge. One from Tommy at the car wash. Saw you on CNBC. Still the best employee I ever had. Proud of you, kid. And one from Marcus. My Marcus. My best friend who'd given me his couch when I had nothing. Dinner tonight. My treat. You're buying next time, though. You're rich now, I smiled and typed back, deal, but we're still splitting it. Some things don't change. I walked to the East River, the same place I'd walked to at 4 a.m. 6 months ago when I couldn't sleep. When I was trying to remember who I was, I stood at the railing and watched the water catch the last light of the sun. And I thought about everything that had happened. Everything I'd lost, everything I'd gained, everything I'd learned. You were always the weak one. Linda Chen's words meant to destroy me had become the fuel. Every time I'd wanted to give up, every time I'd thought, maybe they were right. Maybe I was nothing without them. I'd heard those words and pushed harder. Turns out the weak ones are the people who need cruelty to feel strong. The weak ones are the people who can't win without cheating. The weak ones are the people who destroy talent because they're threatened by it. I was never the weak one. I pulled out the velvet box I'd carried in my pocket for months, the anniversary gift I'd bought for Sarah. The necklace with our intertwined initials. I'd kept it as a reminder of what I'd lost. But standing there watching the sun set over the city that had broken me and rebuilt me, I realized I didn't need reminders anymore. I opened the box, looked at the necklace one last time, and dropped it into the river. It made the smallest splash, barely a ripple, and then it was gone. Some things you carry, some things you let go, some things you build, some things you leave behind. I turned away from the water and headed home, not to Marcus' couch anymore, but to the apartment I'd finally rented in Brooklyn, the one with the view and the space and the quiet I'd earned, and I felt lighter than I had in years. 10 years ago, Richard Chen had offered me a chance to build something meaningful. He'd promised me family, belonging, a place where my talent mattered. He'd lied. Or maybe he'd just been wrong. But in the wreckage of that lie, I'd found something better. I'd found proof. Not proof that they were wrong, though they were. Proof that I was right about myself, about what I could build. About who I'd always been underneath the titles and the validation and the desperate need to belong. I was James Martinez. I'd built an empire once for someone else. Now I was building one for myself, and this time nobody could take it away. James Martinez went on to grow Martinez Global Logistics into a billion-dollar company within 5 years. Sterling Group's IPO eventually happened, underperforming expectations. Richard Chen retired 2 years later. David stepped down as COO 6 months after that, citing personal reasons. Sarah Chen left the family business and started a non-profit focused on workers' rights. James never remarried, but he dated occasionally and found contentment in the work itself. Building something fair, something honest, something that proved excellence doesn't require cruelty. The velvet box with the necklace rests somewhere at the bottom of the East River. The story of what happened to James Martinez is still taught in business schools as a case study in resilience, corporate governance, and the difference between building a company and inheriting one. But James doesn't think about legacy much anymore. He's too busy building the future.
That brings this story to an end. Honestly, a pretty interesting one if you ask me. Let me know your thoughts down below, and let's start with the next one right away. This one is titled,
I dropped by my son-in-law's house unannounced. I walked in, and I froze. My daughter was on her knees in front of her father-in-law. He was grabbing her by the hair, saying, I'm going to teach you how a real woman should act in her husband's house. The truck's engine ticked as it cooled in the driveway. Stephen Danner sat with his hands still on the steering wheel, staring at the modest ranch house his daughter shared with her husband. The afternoon sun cut harsh angles across the vinyl siding, making everything look washed out and tired. 3 weeks. That's how long it had been since Rose had answered his calls with anything more than clipped one-word responses. He killed the engine. The silence that followed felt wrong, somehow, too thick. Through the windshield, he could see Rose's garden, the one she'd been so excited about last spring, choked with weeds now, the tomato plants brown and sagging against their cages. His chest tightened. Stephen climbed out of the truck, his work boots crunching on the gravel. His hands still smelled like motor oil despite scrubbing them twice before leaving the shop. He'd closed early, something he never did on a Thursday. But the knot in his stomach had been there all week, growing tighter each time. Rose's voice on the phone sounded smaller, more distant. The side gate stood slightly ajar. He pushed through it, the hinges squeaking. The backyard was quiet except for the hum of a neighbor's air conditioning unit. Rose's car sat in the carport, so she was home. That should have been reassuring. It wasn't. He approached the side door, the one that led into the kitchen. Rose used to leave it unlocked during the day when she was home. Trusting the neighborhood, trusting everything. His hand found the knob. It turned. The moment he stepped inside, he heard it. A man's voice, not Levi's, deeper, rougher. The words were indistinct at first, muffled by the hallway, but the tone cut through everything else. Sharp, cruel, dripping with something that made Stephen Unk's muscles go rigid. He moved through the kitchen without thinking, past the dishes in the sink, past the faded curtains Rose had hung last year. His pulse thundered in his ears, but his breathing stayed controlled, steady. Years of holding it together during his late wife's illness had taught him how to function through fear. The hallway opened into the living room, and there it was, the moment that would split his life into before and after. Rose was on her knees on the beige carpet. Her face was contorted, not in pain, but in something worse. Humiliation. Terror. A man stood over her, his thick fingers tangled in her hair, wrenching her head back at an angle that made Stephen's vision go white at the edges. Leonard Pike, Rose's father-in-law, 62 years old, barrel-chested, with the kind of face that always looked like it was on the edge of anger. His flannel shirt was rolled up to his elbows, and his grip on Rose's hair was so tight, Stephen could see the tension in his forearm. I'm going to teach you how a real woman should act in her husband's house. Leonard's voice was low, vibrating with false righteousness. This backtalk, this disrespect, it ends today. You hear me? Stephen's daughter was crying, not sobbing, but silent tears streaming down her cheeks. Her hands were pressed against the carpet, trembling. And Levi Pike, Rose's husband, the man she'd married 3 years ago in a ceremony filled with white flowers and promises, stood near the doorway to the kitchen, arms crossed, watching. His face wasn't angry or distressed. It was blank, complicit. Stephen Unk's voice cut through the room like a blade. Let go of her right now. 3 heads turned. Leonard's grip loosened, but only slightly. Levi straightened, his arms dropping to his sides. Rose's eyes found her father's, and something broke open in her expression. Relief and shame and desperate hope all at once. Stephen took a step forward. His hands weren't shaking. That surprised him. They hung loose at his sides, ready, but not clenched. His voice came out even, controlled, carrying the weight of every ounce of restraint he was using. Not to cross the room and break Leonard Pike's arm. I said, let go. Leonard released Rose's hair and stepped back, his expression shifting into something that might have been meant to look casual, innocent, like Stephen had just walked in on a friendly conversation. The transition was so smooth, it was sickening. Stephen. Leonard's tone was almost jovial. Didn't know you were stopping by. Get up, Rose. Stephen didn't look at Leonard. He kept his eyes on his daughter. Get your shoes. You're coming home with me. Rose started to rise, her movements shaky. Levi moved then, stepping forward with his hands raised in a placating gesture. Dad, this isn't what it looks like. Rose and I were just. She got a little emotional. And Dad was trying to help calm her down. Levi's voice had that same rehearsed quality he used when he worked at the insurance office. Smooth and practiced. It's a family disagreement. That's all. Stephen's eyes finally moved to his son-in-law. The younger man was 32, clean-cut, the kind of guy who wore polo shirts on weekends and talked about being a deacon at church. Stephen had thought he was stable, safe, a good match for Rose. He'd been so goddamn wrong. A family disagreement. Stephen repeated the words slowly, tasting them. They left a bitter residue. He looked back at Leonard, who was now standing with his thumbs hooked in his belt loops. Chin up. That what you call grabbing a woman by her hair? Stephen, you're overreacting. Leonard's voice had an edge now. Rose needs to learn. She's leaving now. Something in Stephen's tone made both Pike men take a step back. It wasn't loud. It wasn't aggressive. It was the sound of a door closing. Final and absolute. The sound of a man who had just made a decision and would not be moved from it. Rose found her shoes by the couch, canvas slip-ons, the left one scuffed. Her hand shook as she put them on. Stephen moved to her side, placing himself between her and the pikeman. His hand touched her shoulder, gentle but firm. Come on, sweetheart. Levi started to protest, stepping forward again. You can't just take her. Watch me. Stephen guided Rose toward the door. She moved like someone walking through fog, her breathing shallow and quick. Behind them, Leonard's voice rose, gaining volume. This is wrong, Stephen. A wife's place is with her husband. You're interfering in. Stephen turned at the threshold. One arm still around Rose. He looked at Leonard Pike for 3 full seconds without speaking. The older man's voice died in his throat. Don't come to my house, Stephen said quietly. Don't call. Don't text. If you try, I'm calling the police. He walked Rose through the kitchen, through the side door across the backyard. The late afternoon sun felt too bright after the dim living room. Rose stumbled once on the gravel, and Stephen caught her elbow, steadying her. He opened the passenger door of his truck and helped her in. By the time he walked around to the driver's side, his hands had started shaking. He gripped the steering wheel hard as he pulled out of the driveway. His knuckles white. Rose sat pressed against the passenger door, her arms wrapped around herself. Neither of them spoke for the first 10 minutes of the drive. The radio was off. The only sound was the truck's engine and the occasional whisper of traffic passing in the opposite direction. Stephen Unk's mind was racing, but his face stayed calm. He learned that during the hospital years with his wife, how to keep steady when everything inside was screaming. How to be the rock when the world was crumbling. But this was different. The image of Rose on her knees, Leonard's hand in her hair, kept replaying. Each time it looped, Stephen's grip on the wheel tightened. He forced his jaw to unclench. Forced his breathing to stay even. When they pulled into his driveway, Rose finally spoke. I'm sorry. Her voice was barely audible, scraped raw. Stephen turned off the engine. He looked at her. Really looked at her for the first time since they'd left. Her hair was tangled where Leonard had grabbed it. Her eyes were red-rimmed. She lost weight, he realized. Her collarbones were too prominent above the neckline of her shirt. How'd he miss this? You have nothing to be sorry for, he said, each word deliberate. Certain nothing, Rose. You hear me? She nodded, but tears spilled over again. Stephen reached across and took her hand. It was cold despite the heat of the day. Come on, let's get inside. The kitchen table had been his wife's favorite spot. She'd spent mornings there with her coffee, reading the paper, watching the birds of the feeder outside the window. After she died 6 years ago, Stephen had kept everything exactly the same. Same table, same chairs, same faded placemats. Sometimes it comforted him, sometimes it itched. Now Rose sat in her mother's chair. Both hands wrapped around a mug of tea she hadn't touched. The steam had stopped rising 20 minutes ago. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the kitchen in shades of orange and amber. Stephen sat across from her, waiting, not pushing. He made the tea, set out some crackers she hadn't eaten, and then just sat, quiet, present. Finally, Rose's voice broke the silence. It wasn't always like this. Stephen nodded. Didn't interrupt. When we first got married, Levi was different. Or maybe he wasn't. Maybe I just didn't see it. Her fingers traced the rim of the mug. His family is traditional, he said. Close and kid. They have rules about how things should be. Jitter rolls. I thought it was just, old-fashioned, not harmful. She looked up at her father. The shame in her eyes cut him. When did it change? He asked gently. About a year in, maybe 6 months after we moved into that house. Rose took a shaky breath. Leonard started coming over a lot. He'd sit at our kitchen table and talk to Levi about how to manage a household. I thought it was weird, but Levi said his dad was just looking out for us. Stephen Unk's jaw tightened, but he kept his expression neutral. What kind of management? Everything. The word came out bitter. How I should dress, how I should talk, why I should work. Leonard said a wife should be guided by her husband and his father until she learns the right way. Levi agreed with him. Every time she set the mug down, her hands starting to shake again. Then it got worse. Levi took over her bank accounts. Said he'd handle the money because that's the man's job. He started reading my texts, checking my location on my phone. If I questioned it, he'd get this look. She trailed off, staring at something Stephen couldn't see. What looked? Like I disappointed him, like I was failing at being a wife. Her voice cracked and Leonard, he started correcting me. That's what he called it. If I didn't fold laundry the right way, if I talked back, if I didn't show enough respect. Stephen's hands curled into fists under the table. He hurt you before today. It wasn't a question. Rose nodded slowly. Not at first. At first, it was just grabbing my arm too hard, backing me into corners when he was lecturing me. Then a few months ago, I told Levi I wanted to visit you for your birthday. And Leonard got angry. He said I was putting my birth family above my real family. He pushed me against the wall. Not hard enough to bruise, but hard enough to make his point. The words kept coming faster now, like a dam breaking. Levi locked me outside once. It was February. I'd raised my voice during an argument, and he said I needed to cool off. I stood on the porch for 2 hours before he let me back in. Leonard said it was good for me, that I needed to learn consequences. Stephen felt something cold and hard settling in his chest. Not rage, not yet. Something more calculated, more permanent. They read your messages, he said. That's why you stopped texting me. Levi checks my phone every night. If I delete anything, he knows. Rose wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I tried to call you a few weeks ago from work, but he found out. He didn't hit me, but he took my car keys. Said I couldn't be trusted to drive alone. Leonard backed him up, said it was protective leadership. Today, Stephen said carefully, what happened before I got there? Rose's face went pale. I asked if I could have $20 for groceries. We were out of milk and Levi had the debit card. Leonard was there and he got so angry. Said asking for money was disrespectful. I should have planned better. I tried to defend myself and he grabbed my hair and forced me down. He said her voice dropped to a whisper. He said he was going to teach me how a real woman behaves in her husband's house. The room fell silent except for the tick of the clock on the wall. Stephen watched his daughter, this person he'd raised, who'd been bright and funny and fearless, reduced to this trembling apologetic shell. None of that is love, he thought. But he didn't say it yet. Instead, he asked one more question. Rose, do you want to go back there? Her answer came immediately, desperate. No. God, no. Dad, please don't make me go back. I won't. The certainty in his voice stopped her spiraling. You're staying here for as long as you need. Forever. If that's what it takes. But Levi will. Levi can try. Stephen Unk's voice stayed level, but there was iron underneath. They both can try, but you're my daughter, and I'm not letting anyone hurt you again. Rose broke, then really broke. Not the quiet tears from before, but deep, racking sobs that shook her whole frame. Stephen moved around the table and pulled her into his arms, holding her the way he had when she was small, and the world had scared her. But this wasn't a scraped knee or a bad dream. This was something that had been breaking her systematically, piece by piece, for more than a year. And as Stephen held his daughter while she cried, something crystallized inside him, a decision, a vow, no forgiveness, no compromises, no mercy. The Pike men had made their choices. Now he'd make his. That night, after Rose had finally fallen asleep in the guest room, her old room, really still with the same blue curtains and the bookshelf she'd filled in high school, Stephen sat at his kitchen table with a notepad and pen. The house was quiet around him. The kind of deep silence that comes after midnight in small southern towns when even the crickets have gone to sleep. The fluorescent light over the stove cast everything in a pale clinical glow. He started writing. Not everything, just the facts he knew, the things Rose had told him, the things he'd seen. Physical assault. Leonard grabbing Rose by the hair. Financial control. Levi taking all bank access isolation. Monitoring her phone. Limiting her movement coercion, Leonard's corrections, Levi locking her outside threats, implicit threats about consequences and respect. Stephen stared at the list. It looked stark on paper, clinical, but underneath each line, he could see Rose's face, hear her voice cracking as she described being pushed against walls, grabbed, monitor controlled. His hand moved to the top of the page and wrote one more line. They would try to get her back because they would men like Leonard and Levi didn't just let go of control. They'd come here. They'd make demands. They'd probably bring the whole Pike family. Paint Stephen as the villain. Claim he was turning Rose against them. He needed to be ready. Stephen pulled out his phone and opened a notes app. Started a new timeline. Year 1, marriage seems normal. Year 2, Leonard's increased involvement. Levi's control begins. Year 3. Escalation, physical intimidation, isolation, today's assault. He thought back over the past year, forcing himself to remember the signs he'd dismissed. Rose canceling Sunday dinners last minute. The way she'd started wearing only jeans and loose shirts, nothing colorful anymore. How she'd stopped talking about her job, stopped sharing stories about her life. He thought she was just settling in a married life, busy, distant the way adult children sometimes got. He'd been blind. Stephen set down his phone and rubbed his eyes. The clock on the microwave read 2:47 a.m. He should sleep. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw a Rose on her knees. He picked up the pen again and wrote one more thing at the bottom of the page. No forgiveness, no compromises. It wasn't a plan yet, but it was a foundation. Friday morning came too early. Stephen woke to sunlight streaming through his bedroom window and the sound of movement in the kitchen. For one disoriented moment, he thought it was his wife making breakfast the way she used to. Then reality settled back into place. He found Rose at the stove flipping pancakes with mechanical precision. She'd showered, her hair still damp, wearing an old sweatshirt she must have found in her closet. The bruising on her scalp wasn't visible, but Stephen knew it was there. You didn't have to cook, he said. She glanced at him. I wanted to. I like doing it when it's my choice. The weight of that sentence hit him squarely in the chest. He poured himself coffee and sat at the table watching her work. The pancakes were perfect, golden brown, fluffy. She'd always been good at this, even as a teenager learning from her mother. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Then Rose spoke, her voice small. They're going to come here, aren't they? Probably. What are you going to do? Stephen took a sip of coffee, considering his answer. Nothing I'm not prepared for. But Rose, I need to ask. Do you want to press charges for what Leonard did? She froze, fork halfway at her mouth. I don't know. You don't have to decide right now, but we should document everything. Photos, statements, anything that proves what's been happening. He kept his tone and gentle but firm just in case. Rose set down her fork. Levi will say I'm lying. Then we make sure the truth is louder than his lies. She looked at him, really looked at him, searching his face for something. Whatever she found there made her shoulders straighten slightly. Okay, she said. Okay, we document it. After breakfast, Stephen took careful photos of Rose's scalp where Leonard had grabbed her. The area was tender, slightly swollen, with faint bruising starting to show. Then he had her write out everything she could remember, dates, incidents, witnesses, anything that might be useful. By noon, his phone started buzzing. Text from a number he didn't recognize. Stephen, this is Levi. Please call me. We need to talk about Rose. He deleted it without responding. 5 minutes later, another text. Dad says you're being unreasonable. Rose belongs here with her family. Stephen showed Rose the messages. I'm not responding, but I need your permission to block them. She nodded quickly. Do it. He blocked the number. Then he called Rose's workplace, a veterinary clinic where she worked as a receptionist. He spoke to her supervisor, a woman named Janet, who'd hired Rose right out of college. Janet, this is Stephen Danner, Rose's father. There's been a family emergency and Rose needs some time off. There was a pause. Is she okay? She will be. Can you work with us on this? Of course, Stephen. Janet's voice dropped. I've been worried about her for months. She hasn't seemed like herself. His chest tightened. What do you mean? She's been anxious, jumpy. A few times I saw her crying in the break room, but when I asked, she said everything was fine. Her husband started picking her up from work instead of letting her drive herself. I thought it was odd, but it's not your place to ask. Exactly. Janet sighed. Tell her take all the time she needs. Her job will be here when she's ready. After the call, Stephen found Rose in her room sitting on the edge of the bed with her phone in her hands. Your boss sent her support, he said. And you've got time off approved. Rose nodded absently, still staring at her phone. Levi is calling. Don't answer. He'll just keep calling. Stephen sat beside her. Then let him. You don't owe him a conversation. You don't owe him anything. She powered off the phone and sat on the nightstand like it might bite her. I keep thinking, she said quietly about how it started so small. How I didn't notice until it was too late. That's how it works. That's how men like them operate. Stephen chose his next words carefully. None of this is your fault, Rose. Not a single bit of it. She didn't respond, but he saw her throat work as she swallowed hard. That afternoon, the pikemen came. Stephen heard the truck pull into his driveway around 3 o'clock. The distinctive rumble of Leonard's old F-250. He was in the garage organizing tools he didn't need to organize, but it gave him something to do with his hands. Through the garage door window, he watched Leonard and Levi climb out. Both wore expressions of righteous determination. Leonard walked like he owned the property. Levi followed half a step behind, jaw set. Stephen pulled the garage door shut and walked around to meet them in the driveway. He didn't invite them closer. "Stephen." Leonard's tone was clipped. "False friendly. We need to talk about this situation." "There's no situation. Rose is staying here." "She's my wife," Levi said, stepping forward. His voice had that practice quality again. Reasonable but firm. "She belongs at home. Whatever misunderstanding happened yesterday, we can work through it as a family." Stephen Unk's expression didn't change. "Misunderstanding? That's what you're calling it?" "Dad was trying to help." Levi continued. "Rose got emotional and your father grabbed my daughter by her hair and forced her to her knees." Stephen Unk's voice cut through the excuse like glass. "There's no misunderstanding about that." Leonard's mask slipped slightly, irritation flashing across his face. "A wife needs guidance. The Bible is clear. Don't." Stephen Unk's voice dropped lower. "Dangerous. Don't quote scripture of me to justify abuse. It's not abuse. It's discipline. You laid hands on my daughter in anger with violence. That's abuse, Leonard." And Levi stood there and let it happen. He shifted his gaze to his son-in-law. "You let your father terrorize your wife." Levi's face flushed. "That's not what happened. You're twisting. I saw what I saw." Leonard took a step closer, his bulk seeming to fill the space. "This is between a husband and wife. You're interfering in their marriage." "Their marriage?" Stephen almost laughed. "There is no marriage. Not anymore. You can't make that decision." Levi snapped. Real anger breaking through. "Now Rose is my wife. Under law. Under law. What you and your father did is domestic assault. So if you want to talk about legal rights, we can do that. But not here. Not now. This conversation is over." Leonard's face went red. "We have every right to speak to Rose. You can't keep her from us. Rose is a grown woman who's choosing not to see you. I'm respecting her choice." "Respectfully," Levi said, pulling out his phone. "I'm calling her. She won't answer." Levi's thumb hovered over the screen. Then he pressed call, lifting the phone to his ear. After a moment, his jaw clenched. "It's going straight to voicemail." "Like I said," Leonard lunged forward then, faster than Stephen expected for a man his size. He grabbed Stephen's shirt front with both hands, pulling him close. "You listen to me." Stephen's hands came up, breaking Leonard's grip with a sharp practice motion. Years of working with his hands, moving engines and heavy equipment had left him stronger than he looked. He didn't push Leonard away. Just freed himself and stepped back. "Touch me again," Stephen said quietly. "And I'm calling the police. Get off my property." For a moment, Leonard looked like he might swing. Stephen saw it in the way his shoulders bunched, the way his hands curled into fists. Levi grabbed his father's arm. "Dad, come on." Leonard shook him off, but took a step back. "This isn't over, Stephen. Rose's family. She belongs with us." "No," Stephen said. "She doesn't." He turned and walked to his front door, opened it, stepped inside, locked it behind him. Through the living room window, he watched the Pike men stand at his driveway for another 30 seconds before finally climbing back into their truck and leaving. Rose appeared from the hallway, her face pale. "I heard they're gone." "For now," Stephen nodded. "For now." That night, he started making calls. The first call was to his sister, Michelle, who worked as a trauma nurse at Vanderbilt Medical Center in Nashville. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm but tired. "Stevie, everything okay?" He filled her in on everything. The assault, Rose's revelations, the Pike men's visit. Michelle listened without interrupting her, breathing the only sound on the line. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "How is she?" Michelle finally asked, scared, ashamed, trying to hold it together. "That tracks, Stephen. What you described, that's textbook coercive control, financial abuse, isolation, physical intimidation. The escalation pattern is classic." She paused. "Has she seen a doctor?" "Not yet. She needs to, not just for documentation, though that's important for her own health. Trauma like this manifests physically. Stress, weight loss, sleep disruption, anxiety. Let me make some calls. I know someone at the Women's Center here who specializes in domestic abuse cases. She might not be ready for that." Then we go slow. "But Stephen, you need to understand recovery from this kind of control takes time. Sometimes years. She's going to need support. Probably therapy. Definitely medical evaluation. Whatever she needs. Good. Michelle's voice softened. And how are you holding up? I'm fine. You're not. I can hear in your voice. You're in combat mode. She wasn't wrong. Stephen looked down at his hands, remembering the controlled way he'd broken Leonard's grip, the coldness in his own voice. They hurt her, Michelle, for months. And I missed it. You couldn't have known. I should have. Don't do that to yourself. Men like the Pikes are experts at hiding abuse. They isolate their victims, control the narrative, make everything look normal from the outside. She exhaled slowly. But Stephen, whatever you're planning, be careful. Men who lose control of their victims can become dangerous. I'm already careful. I mean it. Document everything. Every text, every visit, every threat, and consider filing a restraining order. Rose has to decide that, then help her decide because this won't stop. Men like Leonard don't just walk away. After they hung up, Stephen sat in the dark living room, his phone glowing in his hand. Michelle was right. The Pikes wouldn't stop. They'd escalate. Trying to regain control through pressure, manipulation, or force. He needed more than just good intentions. He needed evidence. A case so solid that when the time came, there'd be no room for doubt. He opened a new note on his phone and started a list. Medical evaluation and documentation, photos of injuries. Rose's written statement. Bank records showing financial control, text messages from Levi, witness statements. Co-workers, neighbors, recording of Rose describing the abuse. That last one made him pause. In Tennessee, you could record conversations you were party to without the other person's consent. If Rose described what happened while he recorded it, that would be admissible evidence. He hated the calculation of it, the coldness. But this wasn't about his comfort. It was about making sure the truth couldn't be buried under Levi's excuses and Leonard's authority. The next morning, he approached Rose carefully over breakfast. I want to record you telling me what happened. Everything with your permission. She looked up from her untouched toast. Why? In case we need it for police, for lawyers, for protection. I won't do it without your consent, and we don't have to use it if you don't want to, but having it might help. Rose considered this. Her fingers tapping against her coffee mug. Okay. Yeah, let's do it. They sat in the living room, Stephen's phone recording between them on the coffee table. Rose spoke for 47 minutes, her voice steady but strained, describing in detail the progression of control, the incident of intimidation, the escalating violence. When she finished, her hands were shaking again. But there was something else in her expression, too. A kind of grim relief. I've never said it all out loud before, she said. Not like that. How does it feel? Terrifying, but also lighter somehow. Stephen saved the recording with a date stamp, file name, and backed it up to 3 separate locations. Then he reached across and squeezed his daughter's hand. You're brave, Rose. Braver than you know. She shook her head. I'm not brave. I'll let it happen for so long. You survived. That's brave. Before she could argue, Stephen Unk's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Janet from the clinic. One of Rose's co-workers wants to talk to you about what she witnessed. Can I give her your number? Stephen showed Rose the message. You have a choice here, but it might help. Rose nodded slowly. Tell her yes. 20 minutes later, Stephen Unk's phone rang. A young woman's voice, nervous but determined. Mr. Danner, this is Ashley. I work with Rose at the clinic. Thanks for calling. Is she okay? We've all been so worried. Her husband Ashley trailed off, then gathered herself. Look, I don't know if this helps, but I've seen things. Heard things. If you're trying to help Rose, I want to tell you what I know. Stephen grabbed his notepad. I'm listening. Ashley described 6 months of observations. Levi showing up unannounced to check on Rose during her shifts. Rose crying in the break room and making excuses about stress. A day when Rose came to work with a sore wrist she claimed she'd slept on wrong. Most damning, a conversation Ashley had overheard between Rose and Levi in the parking lot. He was going through her purse, Ashley said, like actually dumping it out on the hood of his truck. He found a receipt for lunch she'd bought for herself, and he got so angry. He told her she was wasting family resources and that she needed to ask permission for purchases. Rose just stood there apologizing over and over. When was this? 3 months ago, maybe late June. Stephen wrote it down. Would you be willing to provide a written statement or testify if it comes to that? Absolutely. Whatever helps Rose. 2 more co-workers called over the next few days. A woman who'd noticed bruises on Rose's arms that she'd hidden with long sleeves in summer. A man who'd seen Leonard Pike corner Rose outside the clinic, lecturing her about proper behavior while Rose shrank against the building. Each conversation added another piece to the picture. And each one made Stephen's resolve harden. On Sunday, a week after the living room incident, Stephen stood in his backyard watering the scraggly lawn and thinking about next steps. Rose was inside reading. Actually reading something she said she hadn't done in months because Levi thought it was wasted time. A car pulled up at the curb. Not the Pikes. Stephen didn't recognize the vehicle at first. A newer Honda sedan, dark green. A young woman got out. Mid-20s, blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked nervous, glancing around as if checking to see if she was being followed. She approached the fence slowly. "Mr. Danner, that's me. I'm Nora Pike, Levi's sister." She said it quickly like ripping off a bandage. Stephen Unk's grip tightened on the hose. "If you're here to, I'm not." She held up her hands. "Please, I need to talk to you about my family." "About Rose?" He studied her for a long moment. There was something different about her. A weariness in her eyes, a tension in her shoulders. Not the aggressive certainty of Leonard or Levi. "Wait here." He turned off the hose and went inside. Found Rose in the living room. "Levi's sister is outside. Does she want to talk?" Rose's face went white. "Nora, what does she want?" "Claims she wants to help, but you don't have to see her. I can send her away." Rose stood, her book falling, forgotten, to the couch. "No, let me talk to her." They went outside together. Nora stood by the fence, hands shoved in her pockets. When she saw Rose, her expression crumpled slightly. "Rose. God, I'm so sorry." "Sorry for what?" Rose's voice was guarded. "For all of it, for not stopping it, for being part of that family." Nora looked between them. "I've been trying to get away from them for years. My dad, as he's controlled all of us our whole lives. Levi learned everything from him." Stephen crossed his arms. "Why are you here, Nora?" "Because what happened to Rose isn't new. It's how our family operates. My dad believes in traditional authority, which really means he gets to control everyone, especially the women. My mom left when I was 15 because she couldn't take it anymore. Levi and I stayed with Dad, and he shaped Levi into a copy of himself. That doesn't excuse what they did," Rose said quietly. "I know. I'm not making excuses. I'm telling you that you're not the first person my father has heard, and my brother has become just like him." Nora pulled her phone from her pocket. "I have proof. Recordings, texts, videos, things that show the pattern. I've been collecting them." Because she swallowed hard. "Because I always knew someday someone would need them. I'm giving them to you." Stephen and Rose exchanged a glance. "Why?" Stephen asked. "Because it needs to stop. Because I'm tired of watching my family destroy people." Nora's voice shook. "And because Rose didn't deserve any of this. None of the women who've married into our family did." "Women?" Rose's voice was small, plural. "Levi's first girlfriend. She lasted 6 months before she left. So my dad scared her. And my older cousin married a woman who lasted 2 years before filing for divorce. She claimed emotional abuse. But the family rallied around my cousin and made her look unstable. She moved to Texas to get away from us." Stephen felt something cold settle deeper in his chest. "Your father has done this before. Over and over. He believes he's righteous. That God gave him authority over his family, and that includes daughters-in-law, nieces, anyone in his sphere. He sees himself as a patriarch in a biblical sense, which really means he's a controlling, abusive man who uses religion as an excuse." Nora held out her phone. "Everything's here. Videos from family gatherings where you can hear him yelling at people, berating them. Texts where Levi admits Dad keeps Rose in check. Recordings of Dad lecturing me about submission and obedience. I'll send you everything." And she hesitated. "And if you press charges, I'll testify against both of them." Rose's eyes filled with tears. "Nora, if you do that, your family will. They'll disown me. I know, but they don't feel like family anymore. They feel like a prison." Nora looked at Stephen. "Please, let me help. It's the least I can do." Stephen took her phone number and promised to call. As Nora drove away, Rose stood in the driveway looking stunned. She was always the quiet one. Rose said, "I never thought. Abuse victims often become the strongest advocates." Stephen said she's been trapped, too, just in a different way. That night, Nora sent over 23 files. Videos of Leonard verbally berating family members at gatherings. His voice dripping with contempt. Text screenshots where Levi discussed managing Rose with his father. A particularly damning video from a barbecue where Leonard grabbed Nora's wrist hard enough to leave marks when she questioned one of his statements. Stephen watched each file methodically, taking notes. The pattern was unmistakable. Leonard Pike was a systematic abuser who built his entire family structure around control, and Levi had learned every technique. But now Stephen had proof. Not just Rose's word against theirs. Multiple witnesses, multiple incidents, a pattern spanning years. He added everything to an encrypted folder on his laptop and backed it up in 3 locations. Then he opened a new document and started outlining a timeline. Every incident, every witness, every piece of evidence, organized chronologically. It took him until 2 a.m. when he finally finished. He had 17 pages of documented abuse spanning 3 years involving multiple victims with corroborating statement from 6 witnesses. Rose appeared in the kitchen doorway wrapped in a bathrobe. "Can't sleep, just finishing something." She sat across from him, looking at the pages spread across the table. "Is that enough to make them stop?" "It's a start." Stephen met her eyes. "Rose, I need to ask you something and you can say no, but I think we should file charges for assault, coercion, and financial abuse against both of them." Her face went pale. "That's that serious?" "What they did is serious. But if we do that, there's no going back. It becomes official, public." Her hands twisted together. "Everyone will know. Everyone should know. Men like Leonard and Levi count on shame and silence. They count on their victims being too scared to speak up." Stephen reached across and took her hands, stealing them. "But this is your choice. I'll support you either way. If you want to walk away, rebuild quietly. I understand. But if you want to fight back, I'm with you. All the way." Rose stared at their joined hands for a long time. When she looked up, something had shifted in her expression. Something hard and certain. "I want to fight back," she said. "I want them to face consequences for what they did. Not just to me, to everyone." "You're sure?" "I'm sure." Stephen squeezed her hands once, then let go. "Okay, then we do this, right? Monday morning, we go to the police together." "What? They don't believe us." Stephen tapped the stack of papers on the table. "They will." The rest of the weekend passed in tense preparation. Stephen and Rose went over every detail, making sure the timeline was accurate, the statements were clear, the evidence was organized. Michelle drove up from Nashville on Sunday afternoon to take Rose to a private medical appointment where a doctor documented the physical effects of prolonged stress and noted the healing bruises on her scalp. "Your blood pressure is elevated," the doctor told Rose gently. "You've lost 15 pounds since your last physical. You're showing signs of chronic stress and anxiety. These are all consistent with trauma." The medical report went into the folder. Sunday evening, Stephen sat on his back porch watching the sun set over Cedarbrook. The sky was bruised, purple and orange, the air thick with humidity. He could hear neighbors' conversations drifting over fences, the distant sound of someone's television, the bark of a dog. Normal Sunday, evening sounds, normal life. Except nothing felt normal anymore. Tomorrow would change everything. Once they filed charges, there'd be no taking it back. The Pikes would fight. They'd hire lawyers. They'd try to paint Rose as unstable, him as interfering. They'd use their church connections, their standing in the community, every advantage they had. But Stephen had something they didn't, the truth. And he was willing to fight for it longer and harder than they could fight against it. Rose joined him on the porch, sitting in her mother's old rocking chair. "Nervous?" she asked. "Determined." "Me, too." She was quiet for a moment. "Dad, thank you for not letting me go back. For believing me always, sweetheart. Always." They sat together until full dark, neither speaking. Both gathering strength for what came next. Monday morning arrived gray and cool, unusual for late summer in Tennessee. The forecast called for rain, and the clouds hung low and heavy, turning the world the color of stone. Stephen wore clean work pants and a button-down shirt. Rose wore jeans and a simple blouse, her hair pulled back. They both looked tired. Neither had slept well. The Cedarbrook Police Department occupied a low brick building on Main Street, sandwiched between the post office and a hardware store. Stephen had driven past it 1,000 times. He never imagined walking through those doors to report his own son-in-law and father-in-law for domestic violence. The lobby smelled like burnt coffee and old carpet. A young officer at the front desk looked up as they entered. "Help you folks. We need to file a report," Stephen said. His voice was steady for domestic assault and abuse. The officer's expression shifted, becoming more attentive. "Let me get someone for you. Have a seat." They sat in hard plastic chairs, bolted to the floor. Rose's leg bounced nervously. Stephen placed a hand on her knee, stilling it, and she gave him a weak smile. 10 minutes later, a woman in plain clothes emerged from the back. Late 40s, dark hair and a practical bond, sharp eyes that took in everything. "I'm Detective Sarah Morales." Why don't you come back with me? No, wait. User said, don't use the name Sarah. Let me fix that. 10 minutes later, a woman in plain clothes emerged from the back. Late 40s, dark hair and a practical blonde, sharp eyes that took in everything. I'm Detective Patricia Morales. Why don't you come back with me? She led them to a small interview room with a table for chairs and a recording camera mounted in the corner. The walls were beige. The floor was scuffed linoleum. Everything about the space felt designed to strip away pretense. Before we start, Detective Morales said, settling in her chair. I want you to know that reporting domestic violence takes courage. We take these cases seriously. I'm going to ask you questions, and some of them might be difficult. Take your time. We'll record this conversation for documentation purposes. Okay. Rose nodded. Stephen said, understood. Who are we talking about here? Who's the victim? Who's the abuser? I'm the victim, Rose said, her voice stronger than Stephen expected. My husband, Levi Pike, and my father-in-law, Leonard Pike. Detective Morales began taking notes. Tell me what happened. Rose started with last Thursday, the living room, Leonard's assault, Stephen Unk's intervention. Her voice trembled at first, but gained strength as she went. Detective Morales didn't interrupt, just nodded occasionally, her pen moving steadily across the page. When Rose finished that part, the detective looked up, and your father witnessed this. All of it, Stephen confirmed. I saw Leonard Pike grab my daughter by her hair and force her to her knees. I heard him threaten to teach her how a real woman should act. My son-in-law stood there and did nothing. Can you describe Leonard Pike's exact actions? How he grabbed her where, how hard? Stephen described it in careful detail. The grip, the angle, the visible strain on Leonard's forearm, Rose's position on the floor. The detective wrote everything down. But that's not all. Rose said it's been going on for more than a year. The violence, the control, it's systematic. She described the progression. Financial control, phone monitoring, isolation, physical intimidation, Levi locking her outside, Leonard's escalating corrections. Stephen watched Detective Morales' expression shift from professional attention to something harder, more personal. Do you have evidence of any of this? The detective asked. Stephen produced the folder. Written statements from Rose, witness statements from her co-workers, text messages, medical documentation, bank records showing financial control, recordings, he said on the table between them. It's all here. Detective Morales opened the folder and began reading. The room fell silent except for the rustle of paper. 2 pages in, she looked up. This is extensive. It's systematic. Stephen repeated Rose's word. This isn't a one-time incident. It's a pattern of abuse. The detective spent 20 minutes going through every page. She asked clarifying questions, requested contact information for the witnesses, made her own notes. When she reached Nora Pike's statements, she paused. This is the defendant's sister. Yes, Rose said. She's willing to testify against them. That's unusual. She's been dealing with their abuse her whole life. Detective Morales closed the folder and looked at Rose directly. Ms. Danner, I'm sorry, Miss Pike. Danner. Rose interrupted quietly. I'm going back to my maiden name. Ms. Danner. Based on what you've told me in this evidence, we have grounds for multiple charges. Domestic assault, coercive control, false imprisonment, financial abuse. Are you prepared for what comes next? This will mean investigations, possible arrest, court proceedings. Your husband and father-in-law will know you filed charges. I know they may retaliate. I know that, too. Detective Morales nodded slowly. Good, because I need you to be sure. Once we start this process, it's going to be difficult. These cases often are. Rose's hands were clasped tight on the table, but her voice didn't waver. I'm sure I want to press charges against both of them. All right. The detective looked at Stephen. And you're willing to testify as a witness? Absolutely. Then here's what happens next. I'm going to take your full statement, document everything and pass this to our DA's office. They'll review the evidence and decide on charges. If they move forward, and based on what I'm seeing here, warrants will be issued. Do either of you know where the Pikes are right now? Levi works at Secure Life Insurance on Cypress Street. Rose said, Leonard's usually a home for 28 Oakmont Road. Detective Morales wrote it down. We'll coordinate with patrol. When we make arrests, we do it carefully. Mr. Danner, I recommend you and your daughter stay somewhere these men don't know about for the next few days. Do you have somewhere safe you can go? Stephen hadn't thought of that. My sister's in Nashville. That's probably smart. Just until things settle. She stood. I'll need a couple more hours with Rose to get her complete statement. Mr. Danner, you're welcome to wait or come back. I'll wait. Rose gave him a grateful look as Detective Morales led her to a different room for the detailed interview. Stephen sat in the lobby, his phone in his hands, watching people come and go. A woman filing a noise complaint. A man reporting a stolen bicycle. Normal problems for a Monday morning. His problem was far from normal. 3 hours later, Rose emerged looking exhausted. Detective Morales walked them to the door. "We'll move fast on this," she said. "Expect calls from the DA's office within 48 hours. And Ms. Danner, you did the right thing." Rose nodded wordlessly. In the truck, Stephen pulled out onto Main Street and headed toward the highway. "We're going to Michelle's. What about your shop?" "I'll call my assistant manager. He can handle it for a few days." Rose leaned her head against the window, watching Cedarbrook slide past. "It's really happening." "It is. I thought I'd feel relieved. I just feel tired." "That's normal." They drove in silence for a while. The rain started halfway to Nashville. Light at first, then heavier, drumming against the windshield. Stephen turned on the wipers and kept his eyes on the road. Rose spoke again, softer this time. "Do you think they'll actually go to jail? If there's justice?" "Yes. What if there isn't?" Stephen glanced at her. "Then we keep fighting until there is." Michelle's house was a small ranch in a quiet Nashville suburb. She met them at the door, immediately pulling Rose into a hug. "You did it," Michelle said. "You really did it." "We did," Rose said. "Dad and they spent that evening laying low, ordering takeout, watching mindless television." Stephen found himself checking his phone constantly, waiting for news. None came. Tuesday morning, Detective Morales called. "Mr. Danner." The DA reviewed the case. "They're filing charges. Multiple counts against both men. We're executing warrants this afternoon." Stephen's grip tightened on the phone. "Where?" "Levi Pike at his workplace. Leonard Pike at his residence. We'll call you when it's done." "Thank you, Detective." "Thank you, daughter. She's brave." After the call, Stephen found Rose in Michelle's guest room, sitting on the bed with her arms wrapped around her knees. "They're arresting them today," he said. Her eyes went wide. "Today, this afternoon. Detective Morales will call when it's done." Rose nodded slowly, processing. "It's really over. This part is at 4:37 p.m. Stephen's phone rang. "Mr. Danner, Detective Morales, both warrants have been executed. Levi Pike was arrested at work without incident. Leonard Pike was arrested at home. He resisted initially but complied once he realized we were serious. Both men are in custody awaiting arraignment." Stephen closed his eyes briefly. "Thank you. There's something you should know. When we arrested Levi at his office, several co-workers commented that they weren't surprised. Said he'd been controlling toward female staff. We're looking into whether there are additional victims." After hanging up, Stephen walked into the living room where Rose and Michelle were waiting. He didn't have to say anything. His expression said it all. Rose stood abruptly. "They arrested them, both of them. They're in custody." She made a sound, half laugh, half sob, and sat back down hard. Michelle moved to her side, holding her as she broke down. Not in grief, Stephen realized, in relief. In release, he stood watching his daughter cry, feeling something shift in his chest. Not satisfaction. He wasn't capable of that. Not yet. But certainty. They'd done the right thing. The hard thing. The thing that would stick. That night, the three of them sat on Michelle's back deck under a sky clearing after rain. The air smelled clean washed. Rose looked more relaxed than Stephen had seen her in months. "What happens now?" she asked. "Arraignment probably tomorrow or Thursday," Stephen said. "Then court proceedings if they don't take a plea deal." "Will I have to testify?" "Possibly. Depends on whether it goes to trial." Rose was quiet for a moment. "I'll do it if I have to. I'll tell the truth." Michelle squeezed her shoulder. "You won't be alone. We'll all be there." "I know." Rose looked at her father. "Dad, I don't think I've properly said thank you for everything, for believing me, for fighting for me. You don't need to thank me. You're my daughter." Still, her voice broke slightly. "You saved my life. Literally, if you hadn't come that day." Stephen didn't let her finish. "But I did, and you're here, and you're safe. That's what matters." They sat together until the stars came out. Three people bonded by blood and by battle, finding peace in the quiet after the storm. The arraignment happened Thursday morning at the Hamilton County Courthouse. Stephen and Rose sat in the gallery. Detective Morales nearby. Leonard and Levi Pike were brought in wearing orange jumpsuits, wrist shackled. Leonard looked furious. Levi looked shocked, like he couldn't believe this was happening. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Judge Harriet Chun. Wait, user said don't use Chun. Let me fix that. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Judge Harriet Wallace, read the charges in flat, professional voice. Leonard Pike, you charged with domestic assault in the second degree, aggravated harassment, intimidation, and coercive control. Levi Pike, you're charged with domestic assault, coercive control, false imprisonment, and financial exploitation. How do you plead? Their lawyer, a slick L-looking man in an expensive suit, stood. Not guilty on all counts, Your Honor. Noted, bail is set at $75,000 each. Preliminary hearing is scheduled for 3 weeks from today. Judge Wallace's eyes flicked a rose. Ms. Danner, there is a restraining order in effect. Both defendants are prohibited from contacting you or approaching within 500 feet if they violate this order. Call the police immediately. Yes, Your Honor. As the Pikes were let out, Leonard turned and locked eyes with Stephen. The look was pure venom, filled with rage and promised retribution. Stephen met his gaze without blinking until the deputies pulled Leonard from the courtroom. Outside on the courthouse steps, Detective Morales briefed them. The DA is confident. We've got solid evidence, multiple witnesses, and the defendant's own texts working against them. But I need to warn you, their lawyer is going to try to discredit Rose's testimony. They'll paint her as unstable, claim you influenced her, maybe suggest financial motivations. Let them try, Stephen said. We have the truth. Truth isn't always enough in court. Mr. Danner, you need to be prepared for this to get ugly. It's already ugly, Rose said quietly. It can't get worse than what they did. Over the next 3 weeks, the Pikes' defense strategy became clear. Their lawyer filed motions claiming Rose was mentally unstable, that Stephen had brainwashed her, that the financial control was simply responsible household management. They tried to get Nora's testimony excluded, claiming family bias. None of it worked. The preliminary hearing came and went. The judge finding sufficient evidence to proceed to trial. The DA offered a plea deal, reduced charges in exchange for guilty plea. Leonard refused. Levi wavered, but ultimately followed his father's lead, so went to trial. The trial began on a crisp November morning, 2 months after that Thursday afternoon, in the living room. The courthouse buzzed with activity, but courtroom 3B was quiet when they entered, just the sound of shoes on tile and papers rustling. Stephen sat in the front row behind the prosecution table. Rose sat beside him, dressed in a simple navy dress. Her hands folded in her lap. She gained back 5 pounds. The dark circles under her eyes had faded. She looked stronger. The prosecution laid out their case methodically. They started with Stephen's testimony, what he'd witnessed that Thursday, his daughter's condition, the mark on her scalp. The defense attorney, a man named Richard Cross, tried to shake him during cross-examination. Mr. Danner, isn't it true that you disapproved of your daughter's marriage from start? No. You never had concerns about the Pike family? Not until I learned they were abusing my daughter. Or was this about control? You couldn't stand that Rose had a new family. Stephen's voice stayed level. This is about a grown man assaulting my daughter in her own home while her husband watched. That's what I saw. That's what happened. Cross tried to rattle him for 20 minutes. It didn't work. Stephen had spent weeks preparing, going over every detail with the prosecutor. He knew what he'd seen, and he refused to be shaken from it. Rose testified next. She spoke clearly, describing the pattern of abuse, the escalation, the fear. Cross tried the same tactics, suggesting she was emotionally unstable, that she'd misinterpreted firm guidance as abuse, that she'd been influenced by her father. Ms. Danner, you admit your father recorded your statement. Isn't it possible he coached you on what to say? No, he recorded the truth. My truth. But you were emotional, vulnerable. Maybe you said what you thought he wanted to hear. Rose's voice hardened. I said, what happened? Leonard Pike grabbed my hair and forced me to my knees. Levi Pike controlled every aspect of my life. Those are facts, not feelings. The jury, 8 women for men, watched intently. The prosecution called Rose's co-workers. Each one described her deterioration over the past year. The tears, the anxiety, the bruises she tried to hide. Ashley's testimony about the parking lot confrontation was particularly powerful. Then Nora took the stand. She looked small in the witness box, but her voice was steady. She described growing up under Leonard's control, watching him berate her mother until she fled, seeing Levi adopt the same tactics. She described the family's pattern of abuse spanning decades. Cross attacked her credibility viciously, suggesting she was testifying out of spite that she'd fabricated evidence to hurt her family. But Nora didn't break. She'd spent too many years under Leonard's thumb to be intimidated by a lawyer. My father is an abusive man, she said simply. My brother learned from him. Rose is one victim in a long line of victims. I'm testifying because it needs to stop. The prosecution played the videos Nora had provided. The jury watched Leonard verbally destroying family members, grabbing Nora's wrist, creating an atmosphere of fear and control. They heard Levi's texts admitting his father keeps Rose in check. By the end of the first week, the defense was scrambling. Leonard took the stand to defend himself. A mistake. He couldn't hide his contempt, his belief that he had the right to control his family. When asked about grabbing Rose, he said, "Sometimes women need firm correction. It's biblical. She was being disrespectful, and I was teaching her the proper way to conduct herself." The prosecutor pounced. "You believe you have the right to physically assault your daughter-in-law. It wasn't assault. It was discipline. You grabbed her by her hair and forced her to her knees. That's your definition of discipline. She needed to learn respect." The jury's expressions shifted. Several women looked disgusted. Levi testified next, trying to paint himself as a caring husband who'd been misunderstood, but under cross-examination, he admitted monitoring Rose's phone, controlling their bank accounts, allowing his father to guide their marriage. He claimed it was all for Rose's own good. Did Rose want to be monitored and controlled? The prosecutor asked. It was what was best for her. That wasn't my question. Did she want it? Levi hesitated. She was my wife. It was my responsibility. So, no, she didn't want it, but you did it anyway. I was being a good husband by your father's definition. The trial lasted 9 days. On the 10th day, closing arguments began. The defense claimed Rose was unstable. Stephen was controlling and the pikemen had simply been trying to maintain a traditional family structure that had been misinterpreted as abuse. The prosecution didn't mince words. The defense wants you to believe this is about misunderstanding, about traditional values. But what you've heard over the past 9 days isn't about tradition. It's about power, control, violence. The prosecutor gestured toward Rose. Rose Danner trusted her husband and his family. She believed their promises of love and partnership. Instead, she got systematic abuse, financial control, physical assault, isolation from her support network. This isn't a family disagreement. This is domestic violence. And the defendants need to be held accountable. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the foreman, a woman in her 50s, stood and read the verdict. On the charge of domestic assault against Leonard Pike, guilty. On the charge of coercive control against Leonard Pike, guilty. On the charge of intimidation against Leonard Pike, guilty for Levi. On the charge of coercive control, guilty. On the charge of financial exploitation, guilty. On the charge of false imprisonment, guilty. Rose made a sound beside Stephen. A gasp. A sob. He couldn't tell. He took her hand and held it tightly. Judge Wallace addressed the convicted man. Mr. Pike. Mr. Pike, what you did to this young woman represents a profound betrayal of trust and a systematic pattern of abuse. This court has heard testimony detailing how you worked together to isolate, control, and intimidate Ms. Danner. Your family structure was not traditional. It was designed around domination and fear. The evidence against you is overwhelming. The jury's verdict is clear and this court will not tolerate domestic violence in any form. She set sentencing for 2 weeks later. At the sentencing hearing, Leonard Pike received 4 years. Levi received 3. Both would be required to attend domestic violence intervention programs. Both would be prohibited from contacting Rose for 10 years after their release. As the baifs led them away, Leonard shouted something about justice being perverted, about his rights being violated. Levi just looked broken, finally understanding what he'd lost. Stephen felt Rose lean against him, exhausted. He put his arm around her and held her up. Outside the courthouse, reporters had gathered. Detective Morales helped them navigate past the cameras. In a parking lot, Rose finally let herself cry. Deep cleansing tears that shook her whole body. It's over, she said between sobs. It's really over. It is, Stephen confirmed. You did it, sweetheart. You stood up to them, and you won. We did it. You and me. Stephen looked at his daughter. This person who'd been broken down and rebuilt, who'd found courage when it mattered most, who'd fought back against men who tried to destroy her spirit. Yeah, he said softly. We did. Spring came to Cedarbrook with dogwoods blooming white against green hills and the air turning soft and sweet. 6 months had passed since the trial. 6 months of slow, steady healing. Rose had moved into a small rental house on the east side of town, a cottage with a front porch and a yard just big enough for a garden. She'd planted tomatoes again, and this time they were thriving. She'd gone back to work at the clinic part-time, slowly rebuilding relationships with coworkers who testified for her. She'd started therapy 1 hour every week with a woman who specialized in trauma recovery. The divorce had been finalized in February. Rose Danner legally and completely. No ties left to Levi Pike except the memories, and those were fading. She was taking evening classes at the community college, something she'd always wanted to do, but Levi had dismissed as frivolous. Literature and art history, subjects that fed her soul. Stephen watched his daughter slowly return herself. Not the person she'd been before, Levi, but someone new, stronger, more grounded, someone who knew her own worth. On a Saturday evening in late April, Stephen stood at his grill in the backyard flipping burgers. Rose sat in one of the lawn chairs, her feet bare on the grass, reading a book for her lit class. The sunset painted everything gold. "Dad." Rose looked up from her book. "Yeah. Do you ever think about them? About what happened?" Stephen flipped a burger, considering sometimes. "Do you feel bad about it? About how things turn out for them?" He looked at his daughter. She was wearing a sundress, yellow with small flowers that she'd bought for herself without asking permission, without worrying if someone would approve. Her hair was loose around her shoulders. She looked content. "Free?" "No," he said simply. "They made their choices. I made mine." Rose nodded slowly, something settling in her expression. "I don't either. I thought maybe I would eventually. Like maybe I'd feel guilty or sad about Levi going to prison, but I just don't. He hurt me. His father hurt me. They would have kept hurting me if you hadn't stopped them. You stopped them, too. When you walked out that door with me, when you testified, that took more courage than anything I did. We both did what we had to do. We did." They fell into comfortable silence. The kind of quiet that comes from shared experience and deep trust. A cardinal called from the oak tree at the property line somewhere down the street. Kids were playing, their laughter carrying on the breeze. "I'm proud of you," Stephen said. "Your mom would be too." Rose smiled, a real smile, the kind that reached her eyes. "I'm proud of us. We didn't let them win." "No, we didn't." Stephen played the burgers and they ate on the patio as the sun dropped behind the hills. They talked about Rose's classes, about the new assistant Stephen had hired at the shop, about Michelle's upcoming visit. Normal things, everyday things. As darkness gathered and the first stars appeared, Rose stood and stretched. "I should get going. Early shift tomorrow." Stephen walked her to her car, an old Honda. She'd bought herself with money she'd saved from her job. Her money, her choice. Before she got in, she hugged him tight. "Thank you, Dad, for everything, for seeing, for believing, for fighting. Always, sweetheart, always." He watched her tail lights disappear down the street, then stood in his driveway for a while longer, looking up at the stars. The night air was cool and clean. The neighborhood was quiet. For the first time in months, Stephen felt something close to peace. Not because he'd forgiven the pikemen. He hadn't, and he never would. What they'd done to Rose, to Nora, to others, that wasn't something that could be forgiven. It could only be stopped, punished, made impossible to repeat. But he'd done that. Rose had done that. Together, they'd taken something broken and made it right as it could be made. They'd fought for justice, and they'd won. Stephen turned and walked back into his house, leaving the door unlocked because this was Cedarbrook and Rose was safe and the Pike men were behind bars where they belonged. He made himself a cup of coffee, decaf since it was late, and sat at his kitchen table with a book of his own, but he didn't read. He just sat there thinking about his daughter's smile, her yellow sundress, the way she'd look sitting in his yard with her bare feet in the grass. Free, that was the word. She was free. And for Stephen Danner, that was everything. Outside, the night deepened. The stars wheeled overhead. The world kept turning. And in a small house on the east side of Cedarbrook, Rose Danner slept peacefully, no longer afraid, no longer trapped, finally, and completely herself. The story of what had happened in that living room 6 months ago would fade with time. People would move on to other scandals, other stories, but the truth would remain documented and preserved, a warning to anyone who thought they could abuse their power over those they claimed to love. Leonard and Levi Pike had learned that lesson the hard way. And Stephen Danner had learned something, too. That sometimes love means fighting, not with fists or rage, but with truth and evidence and unshakable determination. That sometimes the most important thing a father can do is stand between his child and danger no matter the cost. He paid no real cost in the end. Lost no sleep over the Pikes' imprisonment. Felt no guilt over their fate. They'd earned every consequence that came their way. And Rose had earned her freedom. That was justice and that was enough.
That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the stories. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one.